All right, everybody, it is 7:30. Everybody's good to go, I assume? All right, thank you. All right, so welcome to Lakeshore Board of Education Special Meeting Number 1, August 12th, 2020. We appreciate all of you for your participation and continue to make adjustments to the technology on these meetings so that we can have virtual meetings running more smoothly. At this time, if you'd please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Ms. Munger, can we get a roll call, please?
Everyone is present.
All right, thank you. And then we will move on to agenda item number 4, audience participation. We do have Brian, one of our techs, assisting with this, and he'll be helping us with connecting members of the audience that requested to speak. I did want to introduce this segment a little bit because I know we have a lot of people viewing this meeting that may be actually viewing their first board meeting. So let me just explain that per board policy, that this agenda item is intended to allow participants to express their thoughts. It's not designed to be a question and an answer period or a dialogue between the participant and the board. Comments should be directed to the board and not to staff or other participants of the meeting. And having said that, if Brian, if we can get your assistance to connect the first caller, please.
Will the caller with the last two numbers of 35 please unmute your mic, introduce yourself to the board.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can. So this is Sharon, the president of the board, and I would ask that you introduce yourself by name and address and a group if there's an affiliation to a group, and then proceed with your comments, please.
My name is Justin Font. My home address is 30572 Newport Drive, located in Warren, Michigan. Within the Lakeshore School District, I am affiliated with Lakeshore High School Science Department and serve as department chairs for science and school improvement. With my comment here, may I first start by saying thank you to all of the parties that have been involved in all this hard work, the dedication, and careful decision-making that's gone into Lakeshore's return to learning. This past month or so, this has been spent preparing and developing the best possible learning environments for our students and families. And, you know, I was told when I joined this district back in 2015 that Lakeshore was a family, and family always sticks together through the good times and especially the difficult ones. And we certainly have proved that the spirit of the Lakeshore family lives on in all of this. So thank you again to all of this. I wanted to make just a few statements just about the health and safety of all of our staff and students, as well as some of the qualifications and experiences that I can offer to Lakeshore District. So with regard to the health and safety, this, I have been obviously listening to a lot of the news, the articles, reading, especially our return to learning plan that has been going on. It definitely seems as though there is a lot of careful consideration, as I mentioned, that has been going on with all of this. And I think first and foremost, we have to think of our students first, about what is the best possible learning experience that we can give our students. And with all of this and everything within the plan that is going on, it does seem as though we are trying to take as many as possible considerations as humanly possible within all of this, but definitely just something to keep in all of our minds as to be prepared to pivot and to shift with everything going on with all of this. And as the science and research is developing here, as Dr. DePonio, I know that you have mentioned from time to time that we are attempting to make informed decisions through the sciences, and I cannot say that I appreciate it more. But that is definitely something that is key and critical that we do as a team here, as a collective effort here, to try to stick to the science, the research, the facts as much as humanly possible when making all of these considerations for health and safety. In regard to my own experiences, as well as some expertise I may offer here, as some of you may know, I have served 2 years in an online learning environment with my former job before Lakeshore Public Schools. I was teaching biology and chemistry at that same time as well in an online learning environment. And recently, actually this Friday, I will be finishing up my last class for my master's in technology, learning, and design through Central Michigan University. I have spoken with several of the administration, Rochelle included here, that I would love to offer my services to try to, again, implement the best possible learning experience that we can for our students. I know that there's a lot of fears and anxieties amongst the students, the families, and definitely the staff who may or may not be as technological savvy as we would all hope to be here. But I know that through this great leadership that we have, as well as anything that I can contribute here, I know that we can get through all of this to try and provide the best possible learning experience for our students and everything. So I do have some expertise in here with possible designs, some best practices. I'm constantly trying to get out there to try and learn as much as I can so that within this virtual learning environment that we can, try to do the best that we can for our families and students. So thank you all for listening. I do appreciate it here, and that's all I got.
All right. Thank you, Justin. We certainly appreciate your comments and your offer. Thank you very much. Brian, you want to go ahead with the next caller? All right, no other callers yet. We will give them a few minutes, at least a couple minutes here. If they're watching, now is the time to make that call, and we will give you a couple minutes. All right, for those that are watching, we're just giving it another minute or so for anyone that was intended to be a call-in for public participation. And so far, we had one call, but we were expecting a few others, so we're giving them a minute to make that contact with us. All right, one more minute just as a courtesy, and then we will move on with our agenda. Okay. All right, we're going to make the assumption that they have changed their mind about speaking this evening and move on with agenda item number 5, reports for action. And I will turn it over to Dr. DePonio.
The only other agenda item that we would have on here would be in regards to the return to learning plan, is just confirming that's what we're on there. Everyone hear me? Hello?
Yes,
All right. Just confirming that's what we're talking about here, yes?
yes.
Okay, all right. So obviously what we're talking about here is arguably the most challenging item in the history of Lakeshore Public Schools. We've been around for a long, long time, 1926. We've been through a variety of challenges as a community, as a school district. We've never faced something like what we're facing right now. The shutdown that occurred in March, which led to a shutdown through the remainder of the school year, showed just a number of incredibly proud points that I think we can all embrace, that showed the spirit and pride that exists within this community. But we are facing a significantly more challenging time as we move into this school year, and therefore, as a community, as a group, we've really worked to tackle what it is that we're about to present to you. And so what I'd just kind of like to quickly do before we get into the plan itself is just kind of run through a little bit of what's led up to this particular moment and the plan that you're about to be presented with, and a little bit of history to go along with this. So first of all, let me start by saying thank you to the efforts that we've had across the board. We've had a huge number of people that have been involved in this process, from the people that gave up so much time to work on the committees, faculty, staff. Our unions have been exceptional to work with in this, and always. But in this particular item, they've been strong advocates for staff, and they've been strong advocates for the well-being of our students. The administrative team that has worked so closely and so tirelessly during this time period, and for the Board of Education. You guys are wonderful representatives of this community, and you've been asked to vote on something that no doubt is a difficult thing to vote on, and then most particularly our community. We've heard from so many people, so many positive things, but so many stories of need, of support, just across the board. This has been an inspiring time period, and it certainly has been a challenging time period. And to talk a little bit about the challenges as we move forward, we are trying to reopen schools as safely as we possibly can be in the midst of a pandemic. And in spite of the fact that for me, I'll be entering my 27th first day of school, I can't call upon the previous 26 years of experience of opening school to guide me in the decision making. And for the collective 3,000 plus years of experience that we have with Lakeshore Public Schools, all of us are essentially starting a brand new school year. And it's not unique to Lakeshore. This is something that we are all facing in public education. How do we do this safely? How do we protect our staff? How do we protect our students? How do we advance learning? How do we socially distance in an environment that was not designed to do that? All of this, while we still don't have a budget from the state, there's so many question marks. And in spite of that, I am inspired by the work that has been done by this team. In this politically charged and divisive area. People have overcome their personal agendas and issues to put forth something that they believe is in the best interest of the students of Lakeshore Public Schools. And so going back, again, we closed down in March. We moved into emergency remote learning. It was something that I think we were well prepared for, with all of our students working off of their own devices, a learning management system that had been utilized by staff for a long period of time, having a staff that is immensely creative and innovative and caring and well-trained. We did the very best that we could. And while we learned a great deal over that time period, I feel that I couldn't be more proud of the job that our staff did and our students did and our families did while they were at home. We ended the school year in mid-June and immediately turned our attention to what the new school year would look like. We held a series of community meetings, both at the pavilion on site, conducted a number of at-home meetings with families. We surveyed families on a variety of occasions to try and get feedback regarding all of the things that we might be facing as we move forward for this particular school year. On June the 30th, while we were already in the midst of our discussions with community and families and parents and students and staff, the state provided us with the Return to Learn plan that outlined the governor's task force items that we would be required to take a look at and adopt for this particular plan. And in short, what it asks us to do is to come up with a plan of what learning would look like if we were in phases 1 through 3 of the pandemic, if we're in phase 4, which is the phase that we are currently in, phase 5, which we hope to move into sooner than later, and phase 6, which is post-pandemic. Phases 4 and 5 are the most complex. They require certain items. So again, as a reminder to the board and all those that are listening, there are certain items within the governor's task force that we are required to do. We do not have an option. If we are in phases 1 through 6, there are certain items that we must do to adhere to the governor's task force plan. There are certain things that are strongly recommended. And when it came to health and safety, most of those items were adopted. Actually, I'll defer to George when we get to that particular item, but I actually believe that all items that were strongly recommended were adopted. And then as we moved into the recommended items, we looked through those. And again, a lot of these things Lakeshore Public Schools was already doing. So from about mid-July until, recent day, we broke up into committees. We invited parents to be a part of those committees. We invited staff to be a part of those committees, staff representing all of our unions, all of our union groups, teachers, students, anyone that was willing to give of their time and their ideas. We brought them on board because we fundamentally believe that we are collectively smarter than we are individually. And from that, we worked through the governor's task force blueprint, along with the Macomb County Intermediate School District, which gave us a framework to work through. And we pinpointed things that will become Lakeshore's plan. And then we looked at how will those items that either aren't a part of the plan, what are the things that we need to do for Lakeshore Public Schools that would be in the best interest of Lakeshore students? There were 3 committees that were created. There was a committee on the social emotional aspects of what we're going to face, because certainly there's an aspect of trauma here for our kids, and there's an aspect of trauma for our staff that we have to overcome when we cross that threshold back into the building. We need to be prepared to serve our kids to the highest level whether we are virtual or we are face-to-face. We had a committee that focused on teaching and learning. How can we build upon what we did in areas of virtual learning? How can we strengthen that based on feedback that we received from students, based on feedback that we received from parents? And how can we improve upon that? How can we train better? How can we deliver services better? And then also, of course, what teaching and learning would look like for in-person instruction. And then finally, a committee on health and safety, which obviously is at the forefront of everything. Without health and well-being, everything else is a bit of a challenge. So final recommendations were made, which results in the plan that we are presenting here today. And so in a couple minutes here, I'm going to turn it over to our staff. And actually, if you want to go ahead and advance the slides there. Rochelle, while we're waiting for you to go ahead and pop that back up there and advance the slides so that committee chairpersons can go ahead and speak. I'm just going to go ahead. Rochelle, you still with us there? There we go.
Yes, I am. My apologies.
All right, no problem. So as she advances a slide here, I am going to just kind of cut to the chase with a couple of these things. And of course, you know, the committee made up of a large number of staff and students, and it was spearheaded. Dr. Lewis took the health and safety aspects. Mr. Pop and Mrs. Farr took the social emotional aspects, and then Rochelle chaired the committee on teaching and learning. We're gonna go ahead and pass it off here to I think George might be up first with the health and no, it's actually you, Rochelle, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Before you go, I'm gonna just address a couple of things that that are ultimately why people are tuning in today and what people want to know. In the final recommendations of what we and there's a lot. It's a 68-page document that's filled with items that we are asking the board to adopt. Very detailed, and there will be more detail to come out of all of this as we welcome back staff. We need input on how this works down to day-to-day with Lakeshore Public Schools. With that, the final recommendation to the board is that we offer to our families two options for learning. One would be 100% virtual option. The 100% virtual option, we have already pushed out a registration for that. We have, I believe, 250 families plus that have already signed up for that virtual option. And I would argue that that virtual option is most likely the most consistent of the two. And that is not to say that our face-to-face option will not have consistency and organization to it. It most certainly will. But with the nature of what we're facing and the fluid aspects of everything that's going on, I think there is much concern about how things will ebb and flow through the course of the school year. I think we all share that same concern. We recognize that. With that being said, the virtual option is something, and I'm sure Rochelle, you'll get into this in great detail. It is something that we are proud of. It is something that will not shortchange kids in any way, shape, or form. We believe that this will advance kids in their learning, and it will support kids with their social emotional aspects when it comes to being a kid and being in school. Lakeshore Public Schools, I am proud to say, has gone above and beyond when it comes to this aspect of virtual learning. They are exceptionally, they have been exceptionally flexible and adaptable to the needs of our kids. And whether you're in person or you are a virtual student, you're a Shorean. And I'll tell you, we're going to care for you and we're going to guide you, and we're going to develop you as whatever the platform is. So there's that 100% virtual option that people can sign up for immediately. The face-to-face option is a little more complex, and the complexity is because there are so many safety protocols that we will require of our staff and students to assure that by being face-to-face, we minimize as best we can the risk of in-person instruction and the presence of COVID-19 in our society. And so with the face-to-face instruction, there's some basis on this that goes back to the strong recommendation of social distancing to return to in-person instruction. So one aspect that was required, and I'll use a very simple example, is the aspect of masks. And of course, for those of you that are watching today, you see some of us have masks because they're in the room together. Some of us don't because we're either at home or we're by ourselves in a particular office. I would also comment that this board has repeatedly gathered together to work together in person because that has been, in many cases, the best opportunity for advancement in communication as we work through things. I've asked them to work remotely tonight because we had some sound issues that really got in the way of making sure that people could hear things. And obviously, we want to make sure everybody can hear what's being said tonight 100%. So the idea of this social distancing in an organization, a building, an outfit that is not designed for social distancing. We're asking kids to stay 6 feet apart. And if you do the math at a high school of 1,600 kids in the square footage that we have, there's a bit of a mathematical impossibility. For everybody that's been in a classroom over the past several years, you know that 25 kids in a class can't be spaced out 6 feet. And so our options with that, and again, I don't want to steal other presentations, but I do want to address some of these things myself so that there's some I guess get it out there right away. Our options with the 6 foot social distancing were a couple things. One, we ignore what was strongly recommended and just welcome the kids back and do our very best to make sure that they stay spread out, but understanding that they would not be able to stay 6 feet apart. Second option is to build more space and hire more staff and spread kids out that way. And obviously that is not an option, which leaves us with the final difficult option of creating a blended model, a hybrid model, where a portion of the students come in one day while the other portion of the students are learning virtually on that day. And then the next day, a portion of the students come in to learn virtual, to receive in-person instruction, while the other portion of students are learning virtually. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen models like this being adopted throughout the county, throughout the Tri-County area, and throughout the state, as this is a way that many school districts are tackling this issue of how do we space kids out. So this hybrid model is something that will be the other option to our families. Lakeshore Public Schools is recommending that we have a gradual phased-in return to a 50% hybrid model. So at the best case scenario as we move forward, the best situation is we're going to be looking at 50% capacity of our classrooms to keep kids spread out. This concept of gradually phasing things back in is really out of necessity for making sure that as we re-enter into face-to-face instruction, that we can manage with the resources that we have, students coming back and coming back safely. As I mentioned at the start of this, we have no collective experience other than what we're seeing right now on the news of schools reopening for face-to-face instruction. And most of what we're seeing from that news is not positive. We can do it, but we need to make sure that we slowly reintegrate students into our setting, that we slowly reintegrate staff into our setting. And so a lot, if we think back to the spring, there were a lot of times that we had mentioned things of the nature of, boy, if only we could see these kids, a couple times a week, or maybe even one day a week. What good that would be for us, what good that would be for our students. And so with the first 2 weeks of school, and again, this is something that we are going to look for our committees to finalize and give their approval, and then bring back to the board on August the 24th, just as an update, is that over the course of the first couple weeks of school, that we would be looking at on each day about a half day of instruction in person and a half day of virtual learning. And about 25% of our student population would be in each day. So what that means as a parent is for the first couple weeks of school, your child would be in school for about 1 day a week for a half a day to reacclimate them to school, to reconnect with them. Most importantly, to teach and manage our safety protocols, wearing masks, good hygiene, washing hands, staying 6 feet apart in classrooms, staying 6 feet apart in the hallway. How do we enter the building? How do we exit the building? How do we enter the classroom? How do we exit the classroom? So many of our staff, all of our staff, in a regular school year will spend a tremendous amount of time preparing our kids for what school looks like. And that's when things are normal. And obviously we are not in that scenario where things are normal. We need time, we need some space. If we start out small, I am confident that we will have successful school days. And the more success we have, the more success I think we will have throughout the year. And so when we talk about a gradual phased in approach, we'll have some milestones along the way to measure the success that we're having. We'll provide feedback both to our community and staff. We'll be able to collectively discuss as a staff the things that are working, the things that are not working. And we'll be able to do it in a controlled environment so that we can continue to add kids to the building and get back to normal as quickly as possible. The worst thing that we could have is we re-enter like nothing's going on, and we have setbacks that put us in a position where other districts have already made decisions to close their doors after they've reopened. It gives us time to work collectively as a staff. It gives us time to make sure that our sanitizing of the buildings is being done thoroughly, is being evaluated, and it moves us forward. So again, for our families, we have 100% virtual option. We have this gradual phased in hybrid option that will work towards an A day, B day scenario, and we'll be sending out information both in summary form as well as the full plan so that people can review and get an idea of exactly what that means for that choice. And this is a difficult choice, and my heart goes out to all of us that are in this situation, that we're made to make these tough choices. We're filled with fear, we're filled with concern. We have no measuring stick for what things should look like because we've never been in this situation before. But at some point, Lakeshore Public Schools will reopen and we'll be back to normal at some point. There's no doubt about it. In the meantime, we need to recognize that a vast majority of our kids desperately need us, that they need our support, that they need our guidance. They need every aspect of the school that's not just face-to-face instruction. And so we want to make sure that we prioritize our most vulnerable learners first, and make sure that that we're supporting them every step of the way. And so that's kind of a bird's eye view of this particular aspect of the things that we're going to discuss tonight. And with that, Sharon, I see we've got a phone call here. Tell me what I'm either turning it over back to you, Sharon, or I'm turning
Yeah,
it over to Michelle.
I saw that as well. Brian, this is a phone call that was planned and expected at 7:30? Okay. All right. So we will go ahead and take the caller. Our tech is on his way back to that space and we'll connect us in just a moment. For the phone line ending with 62, you'll be brought online in just a moment. And I would ask that you introduce yourself with a name and address. And if there's any affiliation to any groups, please identify that as well. All right, Brian, we're just expecting the connection to occur for the caller ending with 62, please.
All right, caller with ending in 62, please on your phone, hit *6 to unmute your connection and address the board with your name.
Yes, my name is Scott Snodgrass, address 22400 O'Connor Street, zip code 48080. I just had a couple, I guess, concerns or questions. My kids are going to Masonic Heights. One of my kids has a 504 plan, and I'm not sure how that is going to be how that's going to work with the school year, especially if it's online and so forth. That's the first part of my question. Second kind of part of my question may have gone over. I apologize. I called a bit late. If kids were to go to school or so forth, who is responsible, for their care? Because we are putting the kids in your guys' hands. So those are a couple thoughts that I have.
Okay. And I realize that you missed the beginning part of the meeting, Scott, but the forum of audience participation is not actually a question and answer or a dialogue, but it is an opportunity for you to express your concerns. So certainly
Okay.
we hear you. I do think that some of your concerns are going to be addressed as the board meeting continues and our team goes through our detailed plan. But I would say in addition to that, if your questions are not answered, I would ask you to contact the building principal for your child so that you can get your specific questions answered.
Okay. Well, I guess my biggest one is the 504 plan and how that will work going forward. And I will listen to you guys the rest of the night and see what happens. I just haven't heard the last couple of meetings anything about special ed or 504 plans or anything like that brought up. So
Right,
that's
right.
kind of why I'm concerned about that.
Yep, as are we. And I do think some of your questions will at least be addressed topic-wise, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be addressed to the satisfaction of you getting an answer. So I do say if you don't hear what you need to hear tonight, I do still ask that you contact your building principal or if necessary, Dr. DePonio's office.
Okay, not a problem.
All right, thank you for participating tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and I apologize for being late.
No problem.
All right, thank you.
All right. All right, Dr. DePonio, I don't know if you were ready to turn it over or not.
I am ready.
All right, so this is Rochelle.
She is.
Yes. Okay. I just want to thank you, Dr. DePonio, for providing the information that I know a lot of people were waiting for. What we're going to do for you this evening is give you an overview related to the committee work that was done, because as Dr. DePonio said, the actual plan that we're going to be going through with you in just a moment is quite detailed. And so we wanted to pull some of the high level things that we had discussed that the committee was working on and review what those recommendations are, to kind of provide a summary before we dive in to that deeper work in the actual plan. And so if you'll remember, under Teaching and Learning Committee, we had 5 different subcommittees within that committee. Instruction and Movement, which actually had a subcommittee at elementary, middle, and high school. The Remote and Virtual Instruction, which also had committees at elementary, middle school, and high school. I do want to add for Instruction and Movement, kindergarten, because it's a very special time with our littlest learners, also had their own separate in addition to the elementary. We had a communications committee, professional development, and also covered athletics. There were some technology concerns that were included both in teaching and learning and in the health and safety, because those were overlapping. Oh, excuse me. So in Instruction and Movement, Dr. DePonio has already talked about the recommendation is the phased and blended model. So really the goal we're working toward is that 50% in-person, 50% remote instruction using an A-B type schedule. And that is so we can adhere to the strongly recommended social distancing to the extent possible. 12 to 15 kids a classroom, but that phase in, we really are looking at starting smaller, and Dr. DePonio really covered that. To address some 504 concerns, we will be looking at that, and part of that looks at assessments for benchmarking and progress monitoring, what happens with our virtual students, what happens if they're spending 50% or more time remote, and making sure we have those things in place. When we looked at the remote and virtual at the different levels, this was a really important conversation because we really took care of 2 aspects of the plan. We know that we have to plan for remote. That's required of us because if we're in phases 1 through 3, we don't have a choice of being in buildings. We're automatically remote. So we were in the position that our teachers looked at what happened during remote instruction, what we know about best practices for both blended and virtual, and the remote plan that if we are 100% remote also then became the plan for our students who choose virtual classes to make sure that it is seamless, that the instruction they're getting is from our teachers. It's aligned with what they would have in the classroom. So that committee really served a dual purpose with the thinking for our teachers being to plan for remote learning. We know how to do face-to-face, how we have. Plan for remote, we then can take care of our virtual students, and we can work backwards from remote at getting kids in and what that means when we are with them. Some of the aspects for remote and virtual that I think students and parents are going to be interested in is the organization. We spent a lot of time around how this will be organized so that it is more systematic, K-12, and we actually will be presenting that to teachers from the committees tomorrow. So the classrooms are going to have weekly agendas. Those will all be located in Schoology. 100% virtual instruction is a choice for all of our students K-12, and Dr. DePonio already mentioned that registration link has gone out. So if you already know or after hearing the plan know that that is your choice. Please fill that out just as soon as possible. That helps us to start planning. The assessments will be consistent with in-person learning, but they'll be delivered virtually. And we also are looking to make sure that when students are virtual students, they have daily scheduled synchronous learning and connection. When we looked at communications, in addition to streamlining how we were communicating with our families and community, we also identified specific items that families and students needed. So more tutorials on our learning management systems, especially Schoology and Seesaw, and that the communications are going to come through School Messenger and Schoology as our primary points of connecting with our families and students. Professional development, we are charged with making sure that teachers understand how to deliver blended, remote, and virtual instruction. We have continued our partnership with Communications by Design. I will say that professional development continued when we shifted to emergency remote learning. We have had teachers planning what is needed as we work through committees, and already have a series of training to kick off our learning that focuses on remote learning essentials, is embedded in our PLC process, and will result in the creation of units that teachers can deliver in whatever format we are delivering instruction to our students. We will continue instructional coaching, both with our district coaches and with our partners, Communication by Design. We offer webinars, and of course, our primary means of continuing learning is through professional learning communities. So as we get into the plan a little bit deeper, you will hear an overview of how we're required to ensure that we are prioritizing standards, we are assessing learning, that we have a continuous process of assessing what's happening. And I'm proud as a professional learning community district that that is just how we already operate. So that really is just asking the questions that pertain to the current situation and not a new way of doing business for us. And then last, in the athletics, it's really one of those situations where, similar to the health and safety guidelines really being taught to us by the CDC and the Macomb County Health Department, the same thing with athletics. MHSAA, as well as the guidance from CDC and the Health Department, are what we have to follow. And at this point, we're still waiting what it means. We did have a start to fall sports today for practice, or sorry, not today, but Monday. So it was great to see the kids back out on the fields. We've been using safety protocols. We have done a great job with that, and we'll continue to move forward or make more announcements as MHSAA provides additional guidance for us. Dr. Lewis.
All right, thank you, Rochelle. You can advance. Well, the serious work of creating an environment that establishes protocols, procedures, and guidelines to create a safe environment for our staff and our students, considering their health needs, was led by a group of 50 members of our community, including parents, teachers, administrators, support staff, a diverse background here. There were 9 different areas that the Health and Safety Committee focused on. Rochelle, if you would advance the next slide. We will go into the overview. In respect to busing, the recommendation of the committee is that transportation temporarily be suspended for general education students as we phase back into a model where we are transitioning toward moving toward a goal of 50% in-person instruction. This will continually be evaluated. Transportation will continue to be provided for students that have specific provisions within their IEP, or if transportation is necessitated due to their situation regarding housing. In dealing with cleaning, and all of this will be detailed later in the meeting today very precisely, we will be making sure that our facilities undergo frequent scheduled cleanings, common areas, touch points, that cleaning supplies will be made available in each classroom space and throughout the building, that we will train our staff on proper cleaning practices. And at our elementary schools, our playground equipment will undergo regular cleaning. Regarding food service, extracurricular activities, and students gathering, at the elementary level, we're going to make sure that meals are delivered to the students in their classrooms. We'll utilize spaces within the building and outside the building for students to eat their lunch. Secondary students will do the same. We are streamlining our menus and ordering processes so that parents will be able to order meals in advance of their students arriving at school each day to streamline that process and follow the recommendations of the committee in respect to social distancing. We will continue our weekly distribution of meals to our community. There will be regular cleaning of playground equipment, as was mentioned earlier, and recesses will be scheduled once again so that we can keep students socially distanced while understanding that our elementary kids need to have time to go outside and play and be kids. Virtual and in-person extracurricular activities are going to be considered. We intend to continue to move forward with our extracurricular activities, and where appropriate, those would be held virtually as well. Regarding hygiene, as we've all learned over the last several months, this new way of life, we know that our kids are going to need to be supported in proper hand washing techniques, wearing their mask. We will be scheduling hand washing periods throughout the day. There will be hand sanitizing stations positioned throughout the buildings at entrances and in classrooms and around classrooms. We will be utilizing all forms of communication to engage our parents and our community in promoting these positive hygiene practices. As a part of student registration, we want to make sure that we are providing information in a very clear, concise form to our parents so that they are aware of the expectations and what will be happening in each of our buildings prior to their students starting school. And wherever possible, we are going to be restricting the use of shared materials and lockers wherever possible to mitigate the spread, the possible spread. In respect to our medically vulnerable students, the committee has recommended that we take a look at alternative learning areas throughout our buildings and within the district. Our administrative team and staff continue to do that, which means that we will use every available space. We want to make sure that our kids are learning in spaces that certainly respect the fact that they do have medical issues, and if we will utilize all spaces within our buildings to make sure that that they're in a safe environment. Social distancing is kind of at the heart of all these health and safety recommendations. We have a strong supply of PPE for our students as well as our staff. And we have protocols in place for staff that are medically vulnerable and will be possibly requesting a remote assignment. And then the same considerations will be given certainly for our students. Regarding PPE, as I said earlier, in partnership with Macomb Intermediate School District, we have been procuring PPE throughout the shutdown in the spring and throughout the summer. So we have a strong supply of disinfectant, masks, and PPE for our staff and students. In the dealing with face coverings, the committee has recommended to the board that masks are required for all students from preschool through 12th grade. That would include face masks, Face shields are an option, but in respect to clarification from Governor Whitmer's office that masks must be worn, face shields could be worn in addition to a mask. But a mask, a scarf, a bandana must be worn, and that would be, it would need to conform to our school dress code. There are some students and staff that are not able to medically tolerate wearing a mask. And for cases such as this, we would ask that parents provide the school with documentation from a physician letting us know that that is simply something that their child would not be able to tolerate. And in those cases, we are encouraging, the committee recommends that those students wear face shields if they're not able to medically tolerate one. Next slide, thank you. In respect to screening students, staff, and guests, the plan does call for parents to work with their children to conduct daily screenings at home before kids come to school. We would ask the same of our staff. When staff and visitors do report to our buildings, there is a screener that was informed by recommendations from the Macomb County Health Department that is required as a condition of entry. As I mentioned earlier, there will be hand sanitization stations at entry points for visitors and students upon arrival. We are going to ask that the number of guests and visitors be limited in an effort to keep our students and staff safe. Each building will have a designated quarantine room where symptomatic students and staff would be brought and cared for. Those rooms will be staffed by a certified medical assistant that will assess each case individually and work with administration and the Macomb County Health Department in following recommendations that they have set forth when we do have students and staff that are symptomatic. The district is added a position of COVID support liaison. That is someone who will work with the medical assistants, building principals, staff, and parents, and the health department to ensure that all members of our community are provided with the most up-to-date information, best practice, and in the event of a positive case of COVID, they will work with our administrative team to ensure that that is being handled in alignment with the recommendations of the health department. Regarding spacing, movement, and access, as we mentioned earlier, social distancing is at the core of the recommendations of our Health and Safety Committee. We will look at utilizing multiple entry points so that we do not have students congregating or waiting in large groups and large lines outside of our building as they enter school each day. Whenever possible, we'll have kids report directly to their classroom. Sometimes at the end of the day, our school offices tend to get a little crowded. If a student may not be picked up on time, we will be establishing waiting areas that will be staffed to ensure that even during that period that kids are maintaining social distance. We will be asking our students to carry their belongings with them rather than utilizing their lockers. And as much as possible, minimizing that, having the benefit of our Chromebooks. Students, in many respects, should only need to be really carrying their Chromebook with them. Scheduled bathroom breaks are being recommended to ensure that we do not have large numbers of kids in restrooms throughout the day. And once again, we're looking at every space within each of our buildings and across the district that would be utilized. And finally, when we're dealing in the event of positive cases, we will be following the guidance of the Macomb County Health Department. I discussed the quarantine room, and we will be documenting students that are symptomatic, staff that are symptomatic within our Power School system so that we're able to disseminate that to all of our stakeholders.
And I'll be speaking tonight about the social emotional committee. First, to begin with, the Lakeshore has an extensive and comprehensive crisis management plan because of past experiences that was modified to address the COVID issues that may come about. We also had approximately 50 members on our team led in these areas of crisis management, which I'm covering now. If you could go to the next slide for me, please, Rochelle. Thank you so much. So that was added to that crisis management plan. We will be sending out a weekly communication to all Lakeshore stakeholders with updates from each of the committees, the teaching and learning, social emotional, and the safety committees. There will be a point of contact person for each building, and that will be under the guise of the district liaison as well, again, bridging the gap between the outside agencies and the school district. We've also set up a school district hotline email, just calling it back to school at lsps.org to be consistent. And these will be taken by the point person from each building, related questions from parents, staff, and students regarding COVID issues. The staff guidelines and training committee put together extensive training options that will be pushed out to staff monthly. If we find that a need presents itself to add training specifically addressing COVID issues, of course, that will be shared out so the staff can have that. We will primarily be using already our Safe Schools software, which we've been using over the past few years. Some of the topics may be the social emotional, trauma, safety, behavior, and or academic issues. We also have the OK to Say hotline that can be used by students and parents to share pertinent information with the administration. And that's been helpful to us in the past as well as a resource. Speaking to the screening for students, the screening committee created a form for each K-5 parent to receive. The parent will, along with their children, complete this form. It will be for every Lakeshore student in the household, and that will come back to us. We will disseminate that data into different groups so that we can create focus groups and address the needs. That same screening tool will be sent out to each of the students in grades 6 through 12. The student will be responsible for completing the survey. However, we will recommend that the parent does go over that survey with the student so that we are receiving the most up-to-date and accurate information. And without going over each of the questions, primarily the idea is that we are going to get a snapshot of the past week, 7 days of how a child's been feeling physically, emotionally. Have they been sleeping properly or as normal, eating as normal, how they're coping with some things that are going on, and if there's any other issues that they would like us to know. And again, then these would be disaggregated into areas that we could create those focus groups and address those needs. And that is pretty much the social emotional area and what we have added to the plan. Very similar to what we shared earlier. Again, our resources will be housed for staff as well as students and also parents to access in Schoology. They will be pushed out as well in the weekly communications, and the use of the app in Power School messaging will also be something we'll use to push that out to our families. I'm not sure who I hand this over to. Joe?
I will take it over. Yes. So again, just to summarize, what we're looking at for our students is a variety of safety protocols for our students and our staff, a variety of safety protocols, support for the social emotional, and a return to in-person instruction that would be phased in, maxed out at 50% capacity, A-Day, B-Day, and then a virtual option for those that elect to do the virtual option. We think that we have a pretty good comprehensive plan that's going to serve our families well, and continue to move them forward. And so at this point, we're really gonna do quite a bit of page turning here as we go through the actual document itself. And Rochelle, refresh my memory. Okay, my memory has been refreshed. And so again, the return to school roadmap is based upon the governor's task force recommendations. And we went through this item a variety of times. Our committees worked tirelessly on identifying the things that we would recommend to the board. And again, it goes through the different phases, and I don't want to go through things that I've already discussed here. So actually, we'll just kind of move right to safety protocols here, which I believe, George, that's back to you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Take it away, George.
All right. Thank you, Rochelle.
Actually, George, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. Before we get into this page turner, what we've shared with you is really kind of a summary of these particular items. Are there any questions that we want to address at this particular time, President Bartle, or do you want us to keep on moving here?
I am okay with you keep moving, but let's just poll the board. Is there anybody on the board that wants to pause for any questions right now? All right, I'm seeing nothing in the chat. Honestly, I'm not looking at all of the faces at the same time. So if you do want to ask a question, please make a note in the chat so I can easily give you the time and attention.
Go for it, George.
All right. Thank you. So once again, this plan will be going out to our parents later this week so that you're able to go through each of the health and safety, teaching and learning, and social emotional recommendations. So right now in the state of Michigan, we are in phase 4. Many of the recommendations that we'll be pinpointing tonight will be focusing upon these phase 4 recommendations. Phase 3 would require our school district to move back into a 100% only online environment. So Rochelle, if you could just scroll ahead, and we'll start with the safety protocols regarding PPE. So we know for anyone watching out there, this is something that you're really not probably going to be able to necessarily read each of the bullets. But in phases 1 through 3, schools are closed for in-person instruction. Phase 4, where we are at right now, the points that are listed under phase 4 and phase 5, the Health and Safety Committee has recommended to the board that the same protocols carry forward in phase 5 that we established in phase 4. So for instance, the wearing of masks, recommendation would be that hold in phase 4 or 5. That facial coverings be worn by all of our students that are able to medically tolerate them would occur in phase 4 and 5. That would occur within our classrooms. And it is specified here at the bottom of these bullets that they're not to be worn by children under age 2, because we do have a district child care program, and we would need to respect that requirement. So Rochelle, if we move down to the bottom, what you'll see is at the end of each one of these sections, there are local implementation strategies. So the committee's worked on making recommendations that are very specific to Lakeshore Public Schools. As Joe had mentioned earlier, There are requirements that we must do. There were points in Governor Whitmer's task force plan that were strongly recommended, and then there were points that were required, or that were just recommended. The committee, as was mentioned earlier, looked at those strongly recommended and recommended points and said that these are things that we need to do to do everything in our power to make sure that we're providing a healthy and safe environment for our staff and kids. So with that, as was mentioned earlier, facial coverings are required for all pre-K-12 students on buses, classrooms, common areas, and hallways. Governor's executive order defined a facial covering as cloth material that covers the nose and the mouth. And it could be made of a variety of materials such as cotton, linen, and be factory made or made by hand. Facial coverings, gloves, PPE, as I mentioned earlier, will be provided for staff and made available. Staff and students may choose to wear a homemade mask, but we do have a very strong supply of PPE. In the event that a staff member or a student is not able to tolerate medically wearing a mask, we will have a form available for a facial covering exemption. Accommodations will be necessary within the classroom for students that are not able to tolerate wearing these masks. We serve a very diverse student body that have different developmental medical issues, disabilities, and we are certainly sensitive to being responsive to each one of those cases. Face shields will be encouraged for any staff member or students that are not able to medically tolerate wearing a mask. Signage will be posted throughout our buildings, specifying the PPE that is required and our recommended hygiene practices throughout our schools. If you would move on to the next section, Rochelle. Regarding our safety protocols in respect to hygiene, once again, the recommendation of the committee is that the same standards that are established in Phase 4 do carry on in Phase 5. So if we go down to the specific guidelines within Lakeshore Public Schools, we will have hand sanitizer, hand washing stations available throughout the buildings. Our elementary, many of our elementary classrooms do have, our elementary classrooms do have sinks within the classroom. So we will ensure that students are regularly washing their hands. Sanitization stations will be available in all of our buildings, elementary, middle, and high school. Students will be encouraged to regularly practice good hygiene before and after eating activities. Classroom activities where we would normally see supplies being shared, we are looking to arrange those into cohorts so that there is a limit in shared materials. So for instance, looking at science materials, students might be working with a very small group, and then they would be they'd be wearing gloves if they didn't share materials. As was discussed earlier, students, hand sanitizer will be available as students are entering the building, and they will be encouraged to sanitize with staff supervising those points. We are an educational entity, so we're going to spend some time teaching our students how to properly wash their hands. We will be building time into our schedules to ensure that this is happening at least every 2 or 3 hours. We will offer rewards. This is something that is a new reality, and we really want to incentivize kids to care for themselves, and in doing so, they're caring for their classmates. We will utilize a variety of resources to do that, videos, social media, engaging our parent groups to help us spread the word about supporting positive hygiene habits. As I discussed earlier, we will, as a part of the registration process, we'll be providing information to our parents so that they're able to help us, to partner with us in working with their children so that when they are returning to school, that they have these habits already in place so that we are able to maximize the time we have with them in respect to academic instruction. We will, as we look at working with students from preschool through 12th grade, we will have our staff address kind of the unique nature of that spectrum of our population in the sharing of materials and carrying their belongings with them to ensure that that's being done safely. We are looking to restrict or eliminate the use of lockers for a couple of reasons. At the elementary level and at other levels, oftentimes students are sharing lockers. Where that is the case, that is something that we would restrict. It also eliminates a number of touch points throughout our schools that would require us to sanitize them. And we really want to focus our efforts within the classroom and in those areas that students are sharing. So the restriction of lockers would minimize that. And as was discussed earlier, we will have PPE that is available for our staff and our students. But parents and students will certainly have the choice to utilize homemade face coverings, cloth face coverings, as they see fit. Next section, please, Rochelle. Social distancing, spacing, movement, and access. And I do want to go over some of these points. Currently, our administrators and staff are taking a look at each of our classrooms. We are creating learning spaces that are able to accommodate 50% of our students. But as we discussed earlier, we're phasing back toward that 50% of our students being in school at any given time. Initially, we're looking at approximately 25% of our students. So that would mean that we're going to be relocating some large tables and desks to create space within our classroom. And that will be stored in alternate locations. And as more students are able to return to the classroom, that furniture would be returned. Social distancing is really at the heart of each of these recommendations. And specifically, if you scroll down to the local implementation strategies, the committee did talk about spacing desks, that we would be providing training to address the importance of social distancing. We will have signage to reinforce that so that, both within the building and outside the building, that students are maintaining safe distances. Wherever possible, we will have indicators within our hallways to make sure that that is occurring in the hallways, one-way directions wherever possible, stairwells, and so forth. We are calling upon our staff to model those behaviors. We know that our kids, our students, are watching us to take the lead on this, and the committee feels very strongly that our staff will be able to model these positive behaviors because this is a collective and collaborative shared effort. Dealing with our schedule, and Rochelle will speak to this in more detail, but I will say it again. We're working toward a phased-in 50% in-person instruction while we're in phases 4 and 5. As we're taking a look at this phase-in approach, we're giving special consideration to our elementary students, students that have special needs, transitional grades, kids moving from elementary to middle school and then from middle school to high school. We, over the next couple of weeks, will be providing further detail on what our special area classes will look like: band, choir, CTE. And establishing priorities and protocols for what in-person instruction will look like in those areas. At the arrival and dismissal time, we know that those are extraordinarily busy times at our buildings. We want to utilize all of our staff to help monitor and support our students as they are entering and exiting the building. We will utilize, as was discussed earlier, as many entry points as we can safely to ensure that students are socially distancing as appropriate as we screen students that are coming into the building. If we feel that there is a need, that we will be taking temperatures of students as needed. We will look at assigning entrances so that students have the most direct route from their arrival door to their classroom so that we're limiting students in the hallway. We will have staff at each point of entry to support kids as they come into the building. We will be looking to have our students sanitize because sanitizer will be available at each entry point. Teachers will be helping in that effort. Hall monitors, support staff throughout the day. Protocols will be established for students that are arriving late so that they're able to safely get to their classroom. We will, as I had mentioned earlier, and it's mentioned a few times, be restricting or eliminating the use of lockers and other shared spaces. Rochelle, if you go down to the next page, breakfast and lunch. We're going to use every space that we have within our buildings that we can safely have students occupy. Scheduled breakfast times in cafeteria and lunch. We talked about utilizing all areas within our building. If we can safely have students eat in the lunchroom within a cohort, those are things that we would be looking at, and certainly practicing social distancing there. We will have staff to support and assist our students during those times. We are going to encourage you parents as much as possible to utilize our online paying option for school lunches. There is some new software in place that will allow you to pre-order lunch weeks in advance. Although for those that do not feel comfortable or would rather not utilize that, we will have a system whereby you can drop off money for your child's lunches. Within our office, we once again will be practicing social distancing, that there will be areas within the office that are separate so that students are able to maintain distance. We ask that parents, when they are dropping off items, that we'll have an area probably outside of our offices for you to be able to do that so that our office staff will be able to get that down to your child as needed. And you'll notice when you return to our buildings that as we see in restaurants and businesses today, that there will be plexiglass barriers that are installed within our offices to help protect our staff within the office. Next section, please, Rochelle. Regarding screening, I'm going to go through some of these points because you see that within phases 4 and 5, Governor's Task Force recommended, strongly recommended, and we will be doing this here within Lakeshore Public Schools, that there is a designated quarantine area for students and staff who become ill at school, that students that are symptomatic would be placed in that area. They would be provided with a surgical mask until they're able to be picked up. We will, as you see later, we have a very detailed process that has been established with our medical assistants that will be working in those spaces, they will be provided with N95 masks to protect them. And symptomatic students would, of course, be sent home from school. If it is determined that they are going home, according to the health department, for a condition that is not easily explained by an existing health condition. So, for instance, shortness of breath. A student who is an asthmatic, physician could clearly state, well, the shortness of breath was related to that. That would not require a student to be tested, but according to the health department, we would need documentation from parents, from their physician, indicating that the child is safe to return. Looking at our local implementation strategies, the committee, just a wonderfully representative group of parents and staff, including some medical professionals that were in this group. And I will go through some of the bullets. Once again, communication is going to be so important. And when this plan does go out to the community at large, I encourage you to take a look at the attention to detail that has been put into this plan. We will be utilizing all forms of communication to help parents, our staff, and our kids familiarize themselves with this plan, become comfortable with this plan. Family members and other guests, as the caller had mentioned earlier, his child coming to school, and we take health and safety has always been the first priority, among all of our staff when working with our kids here on Lakeshore. So things will be different moving forward in respect to limiting the number of visitors that are within the building, that we will be screening staff that come in. Our caller earlier discussed 504s. We are looking to have 504 and IEP meetings held virtually whenever possible to limit the number of visitors within the building. We would hold the same expectation for our staff in that their own family members are not in the building during in-person instruction. Discussed the quarantine area. We are currently in the process of reviewing applications for certified medical assistants who have applied for these newly created positions within our district to care for students and staff who become ill during the day. Quarantine area guidelines are very clearly articulated here within the plan. At the bottom of this section are some step-by-step protocols that we'll follow. If a student is symptomatic, the classroom teacher would contact the designated person within each school, would notify the medical assistant that would help the student to the quarantine area. The medical assistant or staff member escorting that student would be wearing a surgical mask. They would provide a new one to the student. They would be taken to the quarantine room. The certified medical assistant then would take over responsibility for the care of the student. They would move that student to a designated area within that room. Would have the student wash their hands in accordance with CDC guidelines. As I had mentioned, they would have them change their mask. If there are more than one student in the room at any given time, provisions are in place to ensure that those students are safely kept apart. Symptomatic students, following the guidance of the health department, who are sent home from school, would be able to return following health department guidelines. That will be included in the documentation that goes out to parents later. So if a student has symptoms, It would require, according to the health department, a negative test in order for them to return, or a note from a physician stating that the symptoms are related to another condition, whether it be allergies, asthma, or something else. And then a student would be permitted to return. Same protocols would follow for our staff. We are going to ask our staff to conduct daily self-examinations, including a temperature check prior to coming to work. And if they are exhibiting symptoms, they are required to stay home. We will be asking our families to do the same every morning to check their child's temperature. We would ask that all students that have a temperature of 100.4, according to the health department, that they must stay home and consider testing if symptoms of COVID are present. We have put into place an electronic screening tool for employees and visitors, and we will be making available a screening tool that will assist our parents in that daily self-examination of their children. Staff members will be monitoring students throughout the day upon arrival, and where warranted, the appropriate steps will be taken to ensure that that they're being cared for and that we're responding appropriately. If you would move on to the next area. A lot of this information does overlap. The first bullet indicates within the governor's task force recommendations that schools must cooperate with our health department, and school districts within Macomb County have a wonderful relationship and communication with the Macomb County Health Department, so that partnership is strong. As you look and review this plan in detail, many of the things that I did discuss earlier in respect to students who become symptomatic, who develop symptoms or ill during the day, that these protocols would be in place. So we're going to go down to the next area, Rochelle, because much of this information was covered before, and we'll look specifically at the responding to positive tests among staff and students. So Rochelle, that's fine if you would stay there in the local implementation area. The privacy of our students and families will be maintained. We will report cases to the health department, but confidentiality of student health issues in respect to the greater population will be respected. Cases will be reported to the health department, but privacy will be respected. We will be providing our staff with proper PPE as they're cleaning and disinfecting areas. There are countywide protocols that are in place, and as I had mentioned earlier, that the district has put in place the position of an interim COVID support liaison that will work with all of our stakeholders to ensure that all of these health and safety recommendations are being carried out with fidelity. Rochelle, if you would move on to the food service, gathering, and extracurricular activities. Within phase 4, indoor assemblies are prohibited. Students, teachers, staff must be washing their hands before and after meals. Assemblies specifically that have more than 50 students will be suspended. Off-site field trips that require bus transportation are suspended. Recess, whenever possible, we're going to do that outdoors. We'll be delivering meals to classrooms. Wherever possible, we will utilize our video telecasting technology to continue to maintain that spirit of collaboration and school spirit within the building. Even though we're not going to be able to have students come together in large-scale assemblies, we will look for new and creative ways to connect everyone with each other. Specifically, Rochelle, under the local implementation strategies, if you would move there. And I will just kind of give an overview of this because much of this we have discussed. Lunches will be, student lunch will be held within their classrooms. Other available spaces outside will be following protocols there. We're streamlining our menus, limiting self-serve stations within our cafeteria, creating nut-free, peanut-free, allergy-free spaces within classrooms. So if you have a child who has a peanut allergy, we would continue to respect that and have protocols in place to ensure that classrooms are nut-free and allergen-free where appropriate. As we discussed earlier, our kids need to get outside and play. We will utilize our disinfectant and sanitization equipment that we have to ensure that that our playgrounds are cleaned regularly on a scheduled basis, and we will have our students wash their hands before and after they utilize playground equipment. Regarding extracurricular activities, there's such a diverse number of activities that happen from kindergarten all the way through the 12th grade. And advisors for each of those extracurricular activities are required to follow the guidelines that are laid forth in this plan. And then take a look at very individual and specific things that would need to happen in respect to the activities that they lead. Regarding athletics, we would move to the next section. We will be following the guidance from the Macomb Area Conference, MHSAA, that's the Michigan High School Athletic Association, and requirements, recommendations that are coming out of the National Federation of State and High School Athletic Associations. Moving on to cleaning. We talked about cleaning touch points throughout the building, scheduled cleaning using approved disinfectant, cleaning spaces, desks between uses by different cohort groups. Custodial staff must be equipped with gloves, surgical masks, and face coverings when performing cleaning activities. We have the ability, we have the technology to ensure that each classroom is sanitized at the end of each day. So at the beginning of each day, students and parents can be sure that every one of our classroom spaces will have undergone a deep cleaning using what is called a Clorox 360 machine that will disinfect and sanitize rooms prior to students arriving each day. If we can move on now to the next section, Rochelle. Busing and student transportation. We understand just the importance of this service that we provide to our students and our parents. And the committee really thought long and hard looking at these recommendations. Looking at at the desire to ensure from the time that students, that you entrust your students to us, to the end of the day that we're doing everything in our power to keep them safe. Within our school buses, we're looking at the social distancing recommendations. And social distancing on a bus is a challenge. This is at the heart of why transportation is temporarily suspended. The committee did not feel that it was responsible to have all of these protocols in place where we're cohorting students, where we're social distancing, and not being able to do that on a school bus. We need to ensure that, and for anyone who has utilized Lakeshore Public Schools transportation, you understand that those buses run like clockwork. They are on a very tight schedule, and they're on time. Being able to run a schedule like that and socially distance on a bus was something the committee felt that they would not be able to do. At least initially, we're going to evaluate this as we phase in-person instruction toward that goal of 50%. So we'll keep you updated on the availability of transportation in the weeks ahead. Rochelle, if we could skip down to medically vulnerable students and staff. As our caller mentioned earlier, what about 504s? I know many parents are thinking about what about IEPs and specific plans that are in place for their children. We are currently and will be reviewing all of those plans so that accommodations that are outlined in those are in place both in person and in virtual environments. We will be sharing information regarding how parents and students are able to communicate to us cases where they are medically vulnerable, in particular to this severe illnesses related to COVID-19. And we will have plans in place to individually provide accommodations and alternative learning arrangements for each of those cases. That would be for our students and for our staff. We have protocols in place regarding our remote learning plan, and we'll be frequently seeking feedback from our parents, our students, our teachers, and building leaders to make sure that remote learning plans are meeting the needs of our students that have individualized educational programs and accommodation. For local implementation strategies, in particular for staff, when we will have staff that are going to be requesting virtual assignments because they're medically vulnerable in respect to COVID-19. First group that we'll be looking at will be for staff that are personally at high risk. Second consideration will be for staff that are living with somebody. They're caring for someone who is high risk. We'll also be listening to our staff that have childcare challenges or other reasons that they can't come back to school. And the district is working on plans to be able to help support our staff in the area of providing childcare services so that they're able to help serve our students in person. And then finally, we will have staff members and we have families and students that are simply not comfortable with returning in this environment, and accommodations and provisions will be considered for them as well. Virtual learning, we talked about the importance of feedback, that there will be ample opportunities and venues to provide that feedback, and the committee felt that that was very important, that those lines of communication remain open so that we can ensure that all of the needs of our kids are being met, whether in person or online. A Lakeshore student is a Lakeshore student, whether in person or virtual. All right, that takes us to the mental and social emotional health, and I believe Mr. Pop is going to walk you through that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. As George had mentioned, a lot of what we covered earlier will be in this section where you see here phase 4 and 5. This is the information from the task force we then broke up into our subcommittees. So that is how we broke our committees up: communication, the crisis management plan, so on and so forth. And those are bullet points that led us to that. If we could then go down, it says again, phases 1 through 3. One of the differences I think that will be with the social emotional is we will offer this to all levels of learners, be they are in person, remote, or virtual. We will continue the checks at home and so on and so forth to make sure that we're understanding where our students are as well as families. So that's a very important piece that our group came to. If we could go down to the local implementation, please, Rochelle, and creating our protocols for the social and emotional well-being. Again, the communication, as I mentioned earlier, will be weekly from each of the different communities. We have the point person now, the district liaison. We will acknowledge each and every one of the students' current situations. And as George mentioned, a lot of that then falls into the safety protocols that we will follow. We will go through all of the supports at home and online resources. Again, going back to our crisis plan, utilizing the practices already in place for trauma that may occur and so on and so forth with that piece. Using guidance counselors and social workers and ongoing support for check-ins for our families as well as kids in school, as well as staff members. And again, a lot of this pours over into finding resources that help for staff self-care as well as our students and families at home. And then building the partnerships necessary outside of school, whichever agencies we need to look into for the social emotional learning. Opportunities, Google Meets, for example, with families who need to connect but can't come in to connect, obviously, into the school. We'll open that up in the evening when it would be most conducive to them being able to take part in those things. The physically safe and supportive, engaging learning environment already that we'll establish. But again, in recognition of the times we're in, taking that into account. And then the deepening of the relationships, continuous improving support of our students, families, and staff at all times. Very important for us to can do that. Going through communication, I appreciate you keeping up there, Rochelle. You're doing awesome. Communication protocols to convey all the guidelines to teachers. And again, they will all be following our HIPAA and FERPA policies, as George had mentioned as well. Again, that's an overall umbrella in all of the things that we're doing here. Making sure that the students have access to all supports and processes, events. The schools and teachers utilize the trauma-informed practices when possible and necessary. And then using all of our community resources to provide the social, emotional well-being of all stakeholders. And again, the guidance counselors and social workers, obviously in their role, will be very helpful with that piece. And then we go to our crisis management when necessary. And again, Lakeshores is very comprehensive and covered so much of what we're doing anyway, and that has been modified for us to utilize in the COVID situations. And I know that's a fairly brief overview, but I talked so much about the earlier pieces that the committees came up with. I believe that's pretty much what you'll need for this evening on this part. And I will then turn it over to Rochelle.
I just want to say the good news is we're more than halfway through. So moving on to instruction. The first area under instruction has to do with governance. And really in the governance, what we are asked to do in this plan is to go back to that, the creation of the learning plan when we were under emergency remote. And we were supposed to start with there and reflect on what went well, what we had in place, and what didn't work, what did work. And I'm pleased to say, of course, that was something that we had already begun. We didn't have to wait for this roadmap. We were surveying our students and staff and our families while it was happening. We surveyed them again afterwards, and we already were looking at those things to kind of evaluate where we're at, and with the uncertainty, knowing that things might need to change. We also exhibited exactly what we're asked to do in this plan, which is to be continually evaluating whatever we put into place is not going to be how the whole year goes. Really, the flexibility and adaptability is something that we adopted in our transformation of instruction several years ago, and we certainly have been given the opportunity to put that in place. So in governance, it really started there in creating a committee to look at what happened during remote emergency learning and learn from that and apply it to the plan of what needed to be done. At the county level, the superintendents and other mini groups met and really did a broad county-based overview of this, starting from that level. And then we in turn took that and did that at the Lakeshore level. So I just want to reiterate, and again, some of these things are redundant, but we feel it's important because it is actually in the plan. I normally would not read you bullet points, and I apologize for that, but this is not your normal presentation. And so in Lakeshore, we had the My Safe Start Planning Committee that included focused work and instruction. I facilitated that work. That was one of the recommendations, that we certainly have the curriculum leader in the district to be overseeing the instruction piece of it. And while I'll say that I facilitated it, what was really important, and I cannot thank them enough, is our community and staff, who really are the people that were at ground zero for this, providing the feedback and formulating these plans and making these recommendations. We did a couple of things. We knew that the use of our learning management system was important, so we made Schoology our place where all that committee work happened. It not only helped us to build capacity with both our community and staff and even administration in using our LMS, but it also helped us to fine tune some things, especially getting parents involved in that. More importantly, by being as transparent as we were, we posted all of our agendas. We recorded all of our committee meeting and subcommittee meetings, all of the work that was done in creation of slide decks and recommendations and samples. Those were all posted in Schoology, and the group code was shared with the entire staff. So even staff that were unable to join in the actual committee work at all times had access to any of the work that was being done, so that they could follow up with union leadership, with their PLC partners, with their building principals, with myself or Dr. Lewis or Dr. DePonio. And so really moved to make this very transparent and collaborative. We definitely used those surveys from staff, parents, and students about what went well and what we needed to improve from emergency remote learning. And you will see that some of the protocols that we're holding a little tighter when it comes to how we deliver instruction through learning management systems really came through that feedback. It was important that we offer our family choices. So in-person, blended, and really our in-person in 4 and 5 looks like a blended model. It is a blended model, but also even within that, if parents are choosing a blended model, that could mean less classes for them, being very supportive of what our families need. And then of course the 100% virtual option. So that keeps the focus on students being connected to our school communities. You hear us continually saying Ashorian is Ashorian, regardless of where their instruction and learning occurs. This is really important to us. The other thing I want to mention here is that when it comes to the 100% virtual option, we understand that this plan in any iteration is not what our families are used to us delivering. We understand that school has become a place not just for education and instruction, but it's become the answer in our society for what we do with children all day, so families can work and our economy goes forward. And we know that by not being able to open at 100% for all students, that we're asking our parents to be flexible and adaptive during this time. We feel it's very important for us to do the same thing. So that's why you'll find in our 100% virtual option, if families choose that, you're not being asked to make that commitment for a year. You're being asked at the elementary level to determine that by trimester. You're asked at the secondary level to make that commitment on a semester basis. But we know that things change for our families. People would become more comfortable, situations change. So while those are entrance and exit, please know that as we are asking you to be flexible and adaptive with us, we also are looking to be flexible and adaptive with you in those choices. When we move on to what instruction looks like, they really focus on remote instruction. And this is going back to similar to the governance, is making sure that learning plans were revised. So those original continuity of learning that we created under emergency remote learning, that we revised them, that we looked at the feedback, that were we scaling things to be delivered with a standards aligned curriculum? Are we using high quality digital resources? Are we supporting assessing all of the students in the first couple of weeks of school? And we had a dad express what's happening with the 504 kids. And this is part of our plan, whether we are remote or we're back in a blended model, or when we come back fully face-to-face. That is going to happen someday. We know that. So we are just as concerned about our students who have IEPs, IFSPs, or 504s. And the one thing I do want to assure the community is that when we were forced to go to emergency remote learning, our special education department and special services pivoted as quickly as our general education. And so we began completing IEPs, reviewing 504s that were up for renewal, delivering speech and language therapy, support of other academic assistance. That happened in the first week of switching to emergency remote. Now, we learned a lot from that of how to do it better, but that commitment that from day one those services are provided is something that we're proud of that happened, and also something we learned a lot from how to make it better moving forward. So when we think about our local implementation strategies, some of the concerns we were asked to look at especially have to do with our language learners, so our non-English speakers and the families who don't speak English. We are partnered with the Macomb ISD, so their bilingual services, and they're providing us of translated documents to go out to the families are something we already do. And I already this week spoke with them and our liaison, and we're developing what that plan looks like so it mirrors what's happening in Lakeshore Public Schools. Those support services will also continue using universal design for learning, using the social emotional learning from CASEL are all things that they addressed in the social and emotional wellness, looking at high quality instruction in remote contexts that use synchronous and asynchronous environments. All of those things we have done. So I'm going to get down to the Lakeshore details, but I also want to take a moment to thank our community, because we were in a very enviable position, if that term can be used for emergency remote instruction. We were in an enviable position because our community invested in our schools several years ago. And so we already had, all of our students had a device. We have an amazing technology director, and she has created an amazing team that was able to almost seamlessly continue to provide service to students, keep them in devices. We were able to identify those families that needed help with access instead of having to worry about devices. Our teachers already had a learning management system. We had been partnered with Communications by Design, had training, had virtual coaching that continued through this entire time. And that was made possible because our community made that investment in us through that bond. So I just want to acknowledge that many of these things that happened and our staff worked so hard and tirelessly to make happen also could not have happened in the same way without that previous commitment. So we feel a profound sense of gratitude for our community and having us prepared in that way. When we looked at designing our learning and communication, we are looking at a model that takes us seamlessly between remote, in-person, 100% virtual instruction, or a hybrid of that. And we believe that we will be prepared to deliver that at the beginning of September. As mentioned, our virtual instruction, people choosing virtual instruction and remote, those are taught by Lakeshore Public Schools certified staff. It's going to happen in our Schoology. curriculum and resources to the extent possible. And at this point, there is no reason to believe that that isn't every situation that occurs. Schoology will be used as the learning management system K-12. This is a shift for our K-2. It was the original intent several years ago, but as implementation takes place in stages, just like we're phasing in this return, we phased in some of our technology over the last couple of years. It really was evident in feedback from our community that having that one place to land, that a family goes to one place to access all of their students' agendas for the week's communication from their teachers is very important as we ask them to partner with us in this time of learning. So K-12 will be using Schoology, but that doesn't mean that K-2 is not using Seesaw. And for those who have those younger students, you know that platform is very important to be developmentally appropriate and using technology. And our teachers will continue to deliver and build instructional experiences using Seesaw. We will streamline communications. School Messenger, which is how you receive your communications now, they have upgraded their possibilities. And so we will be able to use Schoology and School Messenger as our two primary communication to deliver from district, from building, and from classroom, so that families, including students, only have to have a Schoology sign-in and a School Messenger sign-in, and we'll be able to keep up with all of our official communications. We're working hard to create non-digital learning kits. We were well prepared with technology, but we know that remote instruction and even virtual delivery of instruction does not mean that students of any age should be sitting on a computer for 6 hours a day. And so it was really important to identify what were those materials. And, you know, Dr. Lewis addressed it when the safety protocols were not sharing materials in the same way. So teachers have been looking by grade level and by department, what are those things that our students need? So if they are 100% virtual, or we are in a blended model where they have enough remote instruction that they're doing things at home, what do we need to provide besides the Chromebook for them to have at home to do those non-digital materials? So that was certainly something that we emphasized. The scheduling of synchronous and asynchronous learning, and this is something where those are fancy terms that people laugh about. Synchronous just means we are connecting virtually at the very same time. So it's not a video, it's not that they're on the device, it is that they are physically in real time connecting with their teacher, with a support staff, with an assistant, so that there's question and answer, two-way communication, instruction delivered in person, but also that there's asynchronous learning. So it doesn't happen entirely face-to-face. We're delivering both methods of instruction. The multi-tiered systems of support remain in place, and that is something that we worked really hard during emergency remote learning. What are our tiers? How do we identify students we're concerned with? Rich discussed the assessment tool for a self-evaluation and family evaluation for social emotional wellness. We will continue to monitor our students using both traditional and non-traditional assessments to identify learning gaps and to make sure that we're addressing those and continuing to provide the supports. We're going to look at providing models for home learning, looking at schedules and spaces and how to communicate those, and also with the understanding that everybody's homes are different. And so while you might see a lot online about parents establishing an entire room or a desk space, or what does it look like, almost like a homeschool environment, we understand that that is not possible for all of our students. So again, when we're looking at the materials that students need, one of the decisions that was made for our younger students was providing magnetic pieces with a cookie tray. And then that cookie tray becomes a work area within a bag. So we're almost delivering a classroom in a bag that wherever the student is, they have the ability to do the work. So what that looks like, and being cognizant that our families in our homes look different, and how do we help families with establishing that? Families that need assistance with independent work can be supported virtually through our district staff. So again, the flexibility and adaptability that we're asking for from our families, we expect that to be a two-way street and a two-way communication. So if it's not working well at home, if your student is not working well with you, we have support staff. Let us know how else we can connect and make sure, be assured that what your child needs, we're helping to facilitate that. But then we go back to the return to in-person instruction whenever we're coming from remote learning. And I just want to say that even though we're in phase 4, we actually are returning from remote learning. We ended our year from remote learning. And so we really feel that in order to establish a safe return, even though our goal is a minimum of a 50% in-person instruction and 50% remote instruction, we don't feel that that return happens immediately on day one with 50%. So looking at how it's phased in, it is really something that we're working on right now. And it may be, like Dr. DePonio said, an afternoon or a half a day a week to begin with. So we have protocols in place with the goal to really be working up to that 50% in person and 50% remote learning. Part of instruction was looking at what to do before schools reopen, and a lot of this covers what we already talked about. They tend to cover these things several times to make sure that we have not missed anything. So looking at best practices for blended or remote learning, looking at grade level proficiencies, how are we assessing students and giving them feedback, what are differentiated support for students, inclusion of social emotional learning. As you guys look at those bullets, you know that we've already discussed that. So the next part is then setting the instructional vision that ensures those things. So here's what we're going to do at Lakeshore Public Schools. We will continue to evaluate and prioritize the standards learning experiences that prepare students for the skills necessary beyond their K-12 experience. It is really important that during this time, while this is a significant shift that no one could have imagined, our priorities of preparing our students are even more important, that the emphasis is on how do you be adaptable enough to shift in unprecedented times? How do you agilely make those shifts? There is no time like now to understand why that is so important. And so we'll continue to emphasize that. The special education, having those IEP and 504s, we did that prior to the end of the school year. We evaluated some students that may have needed some extended year services during summer 2020, and where those were determined to be necessary, we are completing those during the summer. We partnered with the ISD for summer learning programs to reach K-8 at-risk students. So we had kindergarten connection, we had first grade fundamentals, we had STEM literacy for 2nd through 5th. We had math mindset, which this year they included 3rd through 8th grade, where in the previous years it was just a middle school model. And I will say that we have gotten great feedback from both our parents and our teachers that this really helped build capacity and how we can build relationships and deliver more than just digital instruction while we are meeting with our students virtually. So grabbing those students that needed the extra assistance, we looked at 6th grade and 8th grade. We had developed transition camps for those students and again pivoted, and it looks a little different than we had originally imagined, but we still were able to conduct those transition camps. Credit recover for a high school, as well as instructional support for our middle school students academically. We run a pretty traditional program in the summer, and this year again we transitioned to make that available virtually so that students with credit needs at the high school and with academic support needs that were beyond some mindset things, that those gaps, we attempted to bridge those gaps. Progress monitoring is going to be done at the beginning of the school year. One of the suggestions was attempting to assess your students before the return to the school year. And we just don't think not only is it not feasible, we also don't think that's the best use of our time if we are connecting with our students. But we do know that when they return, that assessing our students, so we know how to develop what learning focus they need. So if there's any gaps, teachers are able to adjust and make sure that we fill those gaps and meet students where they're at while we continue to progress them to where they need to be. Many of the things that we're asked to do, prioritizing standards, assessing students, constantly evaluating, that is actually what professional learning communities do. That is the 4 pillars and the mainstays of professional learning communities. So when we're asked to do that, I am proud to say that our teachers are so embedded in this PLC process The district is committed. It's been part of our embedded calendar for more than a decade at this point. And so it's nice to see that the systems the district has in place align with the best practices that we're being asked to do even in this very transitional time. We, of course, have had one-to-one Chromebook devices for 3 years in secondary buildings and 2 years in elementary. So the infrastructure and support with internet and what we need in our buildings was confirmed during that building closure. We pivoted during that time to the system of remote support for devices. So one of the things that Fran Hubert, our technology director, did is recognizing halfway through that our tech support was set up to be only in building, and how we changed that so that anybody could access that. We had days established if you needed new cords, if your device wasn't working, just get a loaner switched out so that students and families quickly still had access to devices and were able to maintain those systems. We already had systems of tracking that. All of those things were in place because we had done that as part of our infrastructure. Again, thank you, community, for your support through the bond that we were ready for that. We evaluated our software and digital systems. We have added additional digital software and renewed licenses that perhaps in another time we wouldn't have, but we didn't want to change a lot and actually enhance what was available to teachers and students and families at this time. Our district social workers attended summer training on trauma and understanding to support social emotional wellness, and that informed a lot of the plans, the return to school plans, and continuing to support them. The psychology assessments that were postponed during building closure, we are looking at starting those in the next couple of weeks. Those are some of the assessments that could actually be done before the start of the school year. And the district, again, plans that students and families who choose to be 100% virtual, regardless of the phase, will be instructed using the district remote learning plans for phases 1 through 3. So it's a seamless Lakeshore delivered 100% virtual experience. Communication and family supports. This is another area specifically about instruction, but community is in several of the different areas that we covered. So we already talked about implementing communication systems, and what we found is that we probably needed to streamline. If anything, we had a couple of communications that, okay, enough, I've got the communication. So really it was more, are we being consistent? Is it regular? And is it delivered through streamlined means instead of a building, a teacher, a district, all using different ways to communicate with our students and families? And so I'll go back to, again, the decision that Schoology and School Messenger will be our primary methods for both students and parents, that there will be additional support on the websites that will include tech support if they need it, print instructions, as well as video instructions on how to use our communication tools and also how to interact with our learning management systems. And that was really important. Appreciate our families and our parents who participated to give us that feedback about what they needed. What we found was we were very well versed in our systems, but the systems were definitely contained within the school day. And the part that we really did not connect was the home to school and the way we used our systems. And so that will be a focus of our communication and family support as we roll out the start of the school year. When we get to the Lakeshore plans, again, School Messenger and Schoology are our main methods of communication. That then allows the details from those communications to be shared out on district media, including Facebook, Instagram, our district website. All of these things will be posted there. Family and student supports are, again, videos, digital tools, explanations of policies and procedures. We also are looking based on parent feedback of having building level Schoology parent groups. So it'll be very important, families, to make sure that you get that Schoology login and that you have your School Messenger information updated so that we can continue to be communicating to you. Student leaders and PTO will be volunteering and doing things a little bit differently this year. They can't be in the building. So how might they bridge these gaps of communication and support, because they are eager to support their schools and their students. And what does that mean as we reimagine and they can't be in the buildings the same? English learners will continue to be supported through our partnership with Macomb ISD, and staff is going to communicate their course setup, weekly lessons, explanation of tools and platforms, their synchronous meetings. All of that will be streamlined. There will be a template that is followed K-12 and definitely at the building level. And the teachers are developing what that looks like, and it will be shared specifically with each class in that first week of school. Whether students are in person, we have a remote blended model, or they're 100% virtual. The next section is professional learning, and it again is talking about providing time to engage in curriculum planning, identifying what students need additional support, how you share your knowledge of digital tools, and what your plan is for professional learning. So I'm going to go back to Lakeshore being in a very enviable spot. That doesn't mean we have everything we need, but in an enviable spot. So we really are aligned with our continuous improvement plan, our district vision and mission, and we'll continue to provide the professional development for instructional transformation, which now is just shifted to include remote and virtual learning. We have a district calendar that the teachers union negotiated with us for instructional minutes, and the first 2 days of the school year will be primarily focused on this remote virtual blended, continuing to develop our expertise on that. Prior to the school start, we will be focusing on safety procedures and protocols, the social emotional wellness, and then the standardization of those learning platforms. Beginning September 14th, which is our first full day of PD in the school year, the instructional staff will be engaging in remote learning essentials, which is facilitated with our learning partner, Communications by Design. The district also employs 2 part-time in-district learning coaches, and we continue to contract with Communications by Design so that all staff has access to a virtual instructional coach Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. So there is call in at that moment when you need something, or book time during your PLC, or it is my prep time and I want to work on this, and they have someone to partner with them. They're not left on their own. We also continue to provide additional webinars, coaching, and learning opportunities. For instance, next week, even though we've used Schoology for several years, there are teachers that have said, I haven't used it in this way. Can I have another refresher? So we'll have an hour webinar available on Schoology. Seesaw is our learning platform for K2. They have done considerable updates this summer. And so again, our partner CBD will be putting on a webinar so that teachers are interested in what those latest updates are, can join that webinar and get a highlight as they are planning for their year. Next part of instruction is how we're monitoring it. And if you look really what the plan is concerned with is phases 1 through 3. We are concerned with all phases of monitoring instruction, but in this particular plan, they're looking at how are we doing with technology? Do we have a system for taking attendance? How do we assess student work? What is the connectivity and access? And again, with our community partnering with us to allow us to be a one-to-one district, with us already having go through emergency remote learning of how we survey families of their needs for internet connection, and then how we respond to helping them. We already have those systems in place, reviewed them from our continuity of learning plan, and are able to move forward with what we learned from there. The expectation is that students will have several different ways of accessing learning. It could be hard copy, it could be mixed media, or it could be digital media. And that was one of the things, again, that we took from our continuity of learning, is that we really need all 3. And even though we are one-to-one, everything will not be done digitally on a computer. So working to develop those models. I will say the higher grades, especially for high school, you're going to see more digital learning, or at least the delivery of expectations through digital. And then the younger the students are, you will see more hands-on, you will see more manipulatives. You will find their little learning bags and learning kits going home with them as we continue to be developmentally appropriate. One of the things that's changed in the emergency remote learning to where we are now is that we were mandated by the state that families were in a very difficult position. This was not something that we had planned for. It was something that we were told to do. And so the issue of grades and expectations for completing were very different than they would have been in a normal year. So we just want to assure parents that while we continue to be flexible with our students and definitely respectful and reflective of where an individual family or student might be, that there will be due dates, there will be deadlines, there will be feedback expectations, and the teachers have established that minimum of once weekly, you can expect a very personalized, formative feedback for your students on the work that they have done. Those are going to be established and communicated to students and families. So the work counts. Which the work counted before because the learning always counts, but the more traditional expectations of due dates, deadlines, attendance at synchronous activities, their participation in submission, feedback, two-way communication is going to be required for attendance and pupil accounting purposes. For K-5, that means our families will need to connect with us once a week. And 6-12, that means our students will have to have a direct two-way communication with our staff. So it's important that we understand those expectations are very different this school year than they were doing emergency remote learning. And then just again, Schoology is our point of entry and communication for any of the remote and virtual learning. And remember that blended learning includes a portion that is remote. Moving on in instruction, this again is the if we are in phase 4, are the standards aligned? As a grade level instruction, are there checkpoints around curriculum pacing? Are we making sure we do IEPs in partnership with the Gen Ed? These are just general practices that are the way that we do business. And so while we will be especially attentive and attuned to what the student learning needs may be and the gaps that students may have that are different than a traditional year, we also have the system in place in order to address that. So the strongly recommended, again, is looking at if you're hybrid, then do your students have connectivity and access? How are we looking at attendance and how are we assessing student work? And we have already addressed that above. We've mentioned this plan can be a bit redundant, right? So our MTSS processes have been reviewed and they're able to be deployed. Support staff was provided training in our learning management systems, as well as how you connect remotely with students and staff during remote emergency instruction, and that will continue. So it's not just our teaching staff, but it's all of our staff that is connecting with students. They were provided training during emergency remote learning, and that will continue as we support to deliver a great learning experience for our students. PLCs are scheduled twice monthly, and we do our best to have grade level have shared preparation times. We are also focusing when we look at our blended models of how those systems might be scheduled a bit differently, but that those priorities of our teachers having that time to collaborate, to evaluate, and to plan, that remains in place, even if it's not on the traditional every other Wednesday afternoon. Our partnership with ISD regarding tutoring services and supporting our English learners continues. Students with 504s and IEPs will continue to receive instruction that's focused on their goals in advancing learning. If phase 1 through 3 includes a stay-at-home order, then we will do the best that we can to provide services such as speech and language, occupational therapy, and physical therapy virtually, and that is in collaboration with the ISD. I do want to just mention that, again, our speech and language services in week 1, our speech and language professionals were already connecting with our students, and we know that some therapies like that are not the same when they're done virtually, but I just want to commend both the families that made the effort to connect and the quick pivot of providing those services virtually. Schedule, we're going to say it again, we are phasing into a blended 50% in-person model of instruction, but phasing in is the key point. What that looks like is being developed, but as Dr. DePonio mentioned, we are looking at maybe half day a week, and how do we build from that to them being in with us 50%. Anyone who wants 100% virtual, the link is already available. Remember that we're being flexible with you. So your commitment is for a trimester or a semester, and we'll be flexible with what you need and what's best for your family of when you return to in-person instruction. So you are still a Shorean if you are 100% virtual. Your seats, we are happy to welcome you back into the classroom at that trimester, semester, or when you feel it is best for you. So thank you for the time to share that. I am now turning it back over to Dr. Lewis for him to take over for facilities.
Thank you, Rochelle. In the district plan, we will be following in phase 4 and 5. All of the requirements as outlined in the task force recommendations. That is coordinating with our local intermediate school district to acquire cleaning and disinfection supplies, that we will be providing school level guidance for cleaning all of our core assets, buildings, playground, as was discussed earlier. After school, we will be alerting all of our custodial crews, both during the school day and our evening custodial crew, of currently recommended standards that are released by OSHA and the CDC. This will be updated regularly and disseminated to our custodial staff. Deep cleaning has taken place in all of our facilities over the summer, and that continues. We are currently auditing our classroom spaces, how they are arranged, how they will be cleaned, and we're looking at the size of each of our spaces, additional spaces that are available in our facilities. We're looking at the ventilation system. Thanks to our community, in our most recent bond, we were able to install modern, up-to-date, state-of-the-art HVAC systems in each of our classrooms in our buildings. That there are guidelines regarding air turnover rates. They're established by the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. They recommend air turnover within a space of 4 to 6 air turnovers per hour. The equipment that we have does permit us to turn over air within our spaces anywhere between a range of 5 and 10 times per hour, depending upon the size of the rooms. In larger spaces, there will be protocols that are in place that will allow us to promote the turnover of air by increasing the occupancy times within our system as far as how long these units run. Currently, they are set on schedule times where they are on during the day and off during periods where spaces are not occupied, but that can be modified to continue to promote that, not recirculation of air within the building, but drawing air from outside and changing over that within our spaces. And then there are other recommendations from ASHRAE, regarding disabling sensors on our equipment that will enable our units to run on more outside air. Regarding facial coverings, that also does discuss the use of facial coverings and PPE for our custodial staff. Once again, we're looking at every space, and we will be keeping our staff current on a daily basis with recommendations coming out of the health department and the CDC. Moving on to operations food service. Many of the same kind of protocols, are taking place with our Director of Food Service, Tina Morris. is working with each of our building administrators in developing plans for the distribution of meals. We are currently conducting outreach to our community regarding those who will be selecting virtual options versus those who will be electing in-person options. Right now, there's a registration form that is out for those that are committed, that have made the decision for 100% remote learning option. Within the weeks ahead, we'll be opening up traditional registration for in-person learning. And that does affect certainly our enrollment and how we will utilize staff throughout the district. We continue to evaluate the need to hire new staff. As was mentioned earlier, we are currently in the process of reviewing applications for certified medical assistants that would work in each of our facilities. It is indicated earlier in the plan, especially in respect to our transportation staff, as there is a temporary suspension of transportation services for general education students. We would be looking to redeploy our transportation staff to serve some of these core needs within our building. We are working collaboratively, and Rochelle said it in her part of the presentation. I could not be more proud of each of our bargaining units, our union leadership, in the partnership that the cooperative, collaborative partnership that they've committed to as we've worked through what is a common goal of doing what is in the best interest of our students and staff. So we will continue to do that. We're looking at every opportunity to utilize CARES Act funding for the purchase of PPE and other materials that will promote health and safety within our schools. We are working with community agencies to identify and address areas of student and adult needs as they arise. We're working with EduStaff, who we contract with to provide guest teachers in our buildings. And we have secured a commitment from many of our district substitute teachers who have expressed a willingness and a desire to return to in-person instruction to work with our students. Building principals are working on master schedules, and in the weeks ahead, examples of those schedules will be shared, as we had mentioned earlier, with members of the Teaching and Learning Committee, and then disseminated to parents and students so that they can get a handle on what our school days are going to be looking like as we phase back in toward in-person instruction. The highest safety protocols will, of course, be in place in the preparation and distribution of our meals to our students. Rochelle, if you scoot down to the next section. We are monitoring all of our expenses that are related to COVID-19. So that would include PPE, additional staff, medical assistance, and that is being accounted for so that we can best leverage these resources as they become available. We're in constant communication with district legal counsel to ensure that we are addressing legal related issues as they arise, and that we are proactive in anticipating issues that we need to pay particular attention to as we move into this school year. And as Rochelle mentioned, because of our one-to-one initiative that we have within our district, every effort is being made to make materials available to students digitally. Technology. The benefit of being a one-to-one district is we are in an enviable position when compared with many others. We have, for several years now, we have had devices in the hands of all of our students. Our Director of Technology, Fran Hubert, continues to oversee the distribution and support of student devices, software, and support. If we go down to the local implementation strategies, specifically here in Lakeshore Public Schools, our one-to-one Chromebook initiative is a well-established, we have a well-established infrastructure there. We're able to track the location of devices, provide timely repair and cleaning of devices. Replacement devices are in place so that students have minimal to no downtime if they have difficulty with a device. During emergency remote learning, frequent opportunities for feedback were sought and responded to, and that has put us in a good position as we move forward into this new school year. When we're looking at remote instruction, we need to make sure that our students are able to access via the internet the services that we provide. So at the beginning of the school year, we will be surveying parents to ensure that they are able to be connected at home. Families that need support and are not able to procure internet services will be provided with Wi-Fi hotspots if they need that support. We have a virtual help desk that is available via phone and email, and experts are on hand to troubleshoot and walk parents and students through issues that they may have as they're utilizing district technology. And we continue to work toward simplifying the sign-on process so that we're removing as many obstacles to getting students logged in so that they can get down to the business of learning. Into the next section on transportation. Our Director of Facilities and Operations, Wayne Satterfield, continues to monitor our busing fleet and look for opportunities as we move forward. We will continue to look at opportunities to be able to resume transportation once stakeholders feel that that is something that can be done safely and reliably. Moving on to the next section that specifically discusses the local implementation strategies. Once again, the district is committed to continue to provide transportation for those students that have specified transportation needs in their IEP and for students who are homeless. And we will be redeploying staff within the transportation department to assist in critical student service need areas within our buildings. All right, that brings us to the end of the committee recommendations. And Rochelle, I will hand this back over to you.
Okay, this really, at these endnotes, is just a template that really says everything that we already said we're going to do, have we done it? And so you'll just see in the notes, it says, are we doing this? Yes, we're doing this. Are you doing food service? Yes, we're doing food service. So it's just another way for them to organize the plan. I don't know that we need details, but if you guys want them, I'll slow down. I'll just point out another couple things. Offering alternative modes of instruction other than in person and summary of materials. Yes, we've already covered that. So continuity of food distribution, absolutely. I guess I'll make a note for my families who are watching this now or the recording, is that it's really important when you complete your registrations, please fill out the free and reduced lunch food form. Eligibility is changing and your circumstances are changing, and that's really helpful to the district in other ways, and we want to continue to provide all of our families with access to that food. So even in the past, if you haven't qualified or you thought you weren't qualified, if you will please take the time to do that during registration, that will allow us to serve you better. This again is the next part with the direct preparedness. So this covers really face masks and the safety part, and they're one sentence summaries of what we have up above in the plan, and then policies and procedures in phase 5. And as we have noted that the Safe Start plan is going to align with district policies, we intend for phase 5 to look similar to phase 4. If we have sustained time in phase 5 and are moving towards phase 6, we can always revisit that. And then the place for the signatures of Dr. DePonio and Mrs. Bartle. And that brings us to the end of the executive orders.
All right, thank you all very much. I know that you've all had time being in the classroom and talking, lecturing or speaking for extended periods of time. Honestly, I don't think I could talk that long without losing some breath or my voice. So I appreciate you sharing the detail with us. All right, so as we return to our agenda, all of that presentation has been about agenda item 5, which was Lake Shores Public Schools COVID-19 Preparedness Response Plan. The recommendation on our agenda is to move to approve the Lake Shore Public Schools COVID-19 Preparedness Response Plan for the 2021 school year. And before I take a motion, I do want to speak really directly to the committee members. So somebody just acknowledge that I'm loud and clear, because this is important that they hear me. Okay, thank you. All right, so I know that it's been an enormous effort for all of our 176 committee members to develop the plan in a short amount of time. I know your efforts included not only time spent in meetings, but also time spent learning about the virus, many discussions with friends and neighbors, and learning about all the aspects of delivering public education. I appreciate your individual mark on this plan. I know it was difficult, stressful, and emotional at times. I know you chose to help because you care about Lakeshore and our students, families, and staff. I know that you have or will be criticized by some that hold differing opinions. Dr. DePonio has been known to share a poem that I'm going to call him out and ask him to share with us now. Dr. DePonio, will you take over for a moment?
Because it would help if I unmuted there. Yes, I think this is wonderfully fitting, and hopefully the people that served on this committee and did this work, this will resonate with them. And it's called the Paradoxical Commandments of Leadership. So here it goes. So people are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs, but follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have, and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best that you have anyway.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. DePonio. So to our committee, you've demonstrated the traits encouraged in that poem. On behalf of the Board of Education, I thank you sincerely for having the courage to step up during this challenge. Your mark on the plan is absolutely valued and appreciated by the entire Board of Education. So thank you so very much. All right. With that, Can I get a motion, please?
So moved. So moved.
All right, I believe.
Support.
Okay, thank you. A motion by Mrs. DeLong, supported by Mrs. Munger. All right, I am certain that we have some board member commentary. Who would like to go first? Questions, comments? All right, Mr. Densler, go ahead.
All right. So I do want to just echo, Sharon hit this on the head, but just the appreciation for our committee members, and then of course as well for our district leadership for even just laying out that framework. This is a situation where it often feels like there are no right answers, but I think we at least took the right steps, followed the right process, and engaged the right people to get the best answers that we could. So I appreciate our leadership for engaging those folks, and I of course appreciate the folks that helped. I have one question, and then after that I'll have a couple comments. But Dr. DePonio, if you could speak to the level of commitment and rigidity in this plan, such that, you know, by adopting this plan, if we are in phase 4, but we're to decide that an all virtual option is the best, or if we're in phase 4 or 5, but decide that some more relaxed protocols are actually fitting given the situation, what flexibility do we have to determine what is best for Lakeshore under this plan?
Thank you, Josh. That's a great question. This plan, like the continuity of learning plan that we adopted in the spring, actually it was not adopted, it was submitted on behalf of the district, but we'll offer the opportunity for revisions as we move along. There is no place for rigidity in this. This plan is absolutely not one size fits all. I recognize, as I know everyone on the board here recognizes, and those that worked so tirelessly on this, that this is creating a substantial burden on our families. And that is the last thing that we want to do. We will be as flexible and responsive as we possibly can be while maintaining the safest environment that we possibly can achieve. It takes remarkable courage for someone who receives transportation for the child to recommend that transportation be suspended because they know it's for the greater good of our community. It takes remarkable courage for families that have multiple children that now they have to figure out how to resolve daycare issues and advance their education when they're only coming to school a couple days a week, so that we can have a safer community by adhering to social distancing guidelines. There is no place for rigidity with this. We've got to be flexible. We've got to be fluid. We've got to be responsive to our families' needs. And above all things, we need to rally together as a community to support one another with this. For kids that need a ride to school, we need to figure out a way to get them there if we can't get them on a bus. For kids that struggle with math, we need to work together to figure out ways that we can give them supplemental help when they're not in school. You know, I know that this is a tough time for everyone, and it is a darn near impossible situation for everybody. But I can only pledge that, or certainly affirm that the heart of the staff and the community of Lakeshore will carry us through what is undoubtedly going to be a challenging time period. But it won't last forever. Sorry, Josh. That was way too long.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much, Joe. So part of the reason that I ask that is, you know, for the record tonight, I am going to be voting in favor of this plan. It is the best plan, I think, that we could come up with to fit our district and to protect our students when it is time to reopen. That being said, my support for this plan does not indicate support for reopening at this time. I don't think reopening at our normal start date in September is prudent at this time. I think that the risk versus reward, the potential public health implications are just too severe to allow for the reopening of education. I think we're trending in the wrong direction, and part of the reason we're trending in the wrong direction with the coronavirus is because businesses have reopened, restaurants have reopened, and the more that society reopens, the more transmission there will be, and the more transmission leads to more people getting ill and suffering consequences. So I do just want to be very clear on that. I support this plan for when we're ready to reopen, but under no circumstances do I personally feel that we are going to be ready to do that in the beginning of September. And of course, in saying that, I don't speak on behalf of the district or the administration. I speak as one member of 7 on the board. But I did just want to make that clear. Again, I thank everyone for your consistent leadership and participation at all levels and all groups. That's all that I have. To anyone that is still awake and still listening, I thank you for keeping with us for this long. And I will turn it back to Mrs. Bartle.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Denzler. Mr. Colling, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I want to echo Josh's sentiments and also share that as someone who's able to participate, at least partly in the planning process, you're absolutely right that there's so much trust in the process itself that even though there isn't a perfect plan for this moment, this is certainly the best that we can do, and you can trust the process that it came out from. So that said, I did have a couple questions just for clarity's sake, because I don't think it was mentioned. When is the deadline that families have to decide the virtual option?
At this point, we're not going to establish a deadline. I don't want to add pressure to an already pressure-packed situation by telling families that we need to know in a week. That's not fair to our families. That's not fair to our community. Certainly, we have to prepare, and we have to plan, and we have to staff. But it's too early to be telling people the clock is ticking. As we move through this and we see that questions are coming less frequently, I think at that point, for those families that have not indicated a preference, that we will certainly reach out to them, and then we'll push out a date that says, we need to know, at a certain point. But I wouldn't expect that would be inside of the month of August. Again, we would speak as a team and with our committees to talk about what would be a good firm date that we can assist people in letting them have the information to make a decision. I think as a father, especially if my kids were back younger in elementary age and having to make the agonizing decision of do I sign them up for virtual or do I send them back to school, and of course the fear of health and safety and all that. That being said, again, I can't stress enough the issue of being flexible and adaptable to our families, that if they pick a path and it's not working for their family, certainly we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we provide them with the additional assistance that they need. But if it's not working, we're not digging our heels in and saying, hey, you signed up for this, you're stuck with it. That's not Lakeshore. That's not how we're going to operate. We'll work with families to provide them with assistance and guide them in what's going to be best for their family, and work with them and on their behalf. So, Dan, I struggle to give you a specific date right now. Again, you ask a simple question, it takes me 20 minutes to answer it. I apologize for that. But again, I don't want to add pressure to families at this point. So At this point, we're going to field a lot of questions, and we're going to try and answer them as best as we possibly can. And once people feel comfortable with having enough information, we'll ask them at that time what they would like to do.
Thank you, Joe. And for the record, I agree. I wanted to make sure that that was expressed. 'Cause I know it's going to be a big question that's out there just off the bat. So my other question was around, we talked about having measures for gauging when it's appropriate to ramp up with our phase-in approach. Is there anything that has at least been, discussed preliminarily as to what those measures might be and when we think it'll be appropriate to ramp up to the 50% goal?
Certainly. So, the first thing is always the work with the Macomb County Health Department in terms of the cases that are being presented, not only in our region, but more specifically in Macomb County and St. Clair Shores. That will be something that we will be closely monitoring on a day-by-day basis. Most of it is presented to us in 7-day averages. So on a weekly basis is really when we can assess the direction that the virus is present in our community. Aside from that, in terms of where we're at as a building, it's going to be a daily evaluation of what has worked and what hasn't worked. At the end of that first day, and we hope that first day is, we plan for Tuesday, September the 8th. At the end of that day, which we anticipate would be a half day, bringing staff together, socially distant, all safety protocols in place, probably outside, to discuss, all right, what issues did we see? So that Tuesday or Wednesday, September the 9th, we are better prepared for the next group of kids that come into the building. We are going to learn so much over the course of those first 2 weeks. And I know that this staff in this community is so innovative that I firmly believe that we will establish a model on how this is all supposed to work, the next time the next pandemic rolls around. Hopefully, obviously, I say that in jest, that's not the case. But we would really measure, what sort of success we're having on a daily basis and evaluate as a team at the end of the week and report back to committees to say, hey, here's where we're at. We believe we have the capacity to add students, or you know what, we're not going in the right direction here. We need to scale things back.
Thank you. That's all I have at the moment. Turn it back over to you, President Bartle.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bakotic, you're up.
All right, thank you. I did have a couple questions, and one of them was kind of already covered by both Dan and Josh's questions there with the rollout for the in-person learning. The one I did have to start with, I think Dr. Lewis had addressed a little bit of, it had to do with ventilation in the classrooms. It sounds like we do have some very new ventilation systems in place right now. But I know, I think some people have made comments in the past about filtration being a concern. If filtration systems we have in place would be adequate to add protection against COVID-19, or if that's even a possibility or something we'd need to do. And have there been any recommendations on modifications to filtration systems or ventilation systems? Is there anything like that we've received from the county or any other areas where we're getting guidance?
I can take this, George, if you want, but if I leave something out, please let me know. So there's a thing called MERV ratings on filters, and we were running a filter that had a MERV rating of 7. The higher the number, the more condensed the filtration system is, which catches more things going through it. George had mentioned about ASHRAE, which is this airflow system organization. It's a organization of engineers for airflow and airflow systems, and they recommend in this particular scenario a filter with a MERV rating of 13, which all of those we are taking delivery of and have begun to install those across the district. So those are in place or will be in place by the time the school year begins. George, anything I left out there on MERV ratings and filters?
No, you addressed it exactly. We do have the ability to disable CO2 sensors within the units, which will enable the units to run with more outside air. So that's something that we're able to do to help them circulate additional air. As far as opening windows, that's been something that has been, discussed in respect to the virus, and the plan does address considering that. Opening windows to comfort the occupant will affect the efficiency of the unit, but it can introduce more outside air. So depending upon where those units are positioned within our buildings, those are things that we would look at so that they're running at peak efficiency according to the guidelines that we are receiving from that industry standard organization.
All right, thank you both for that answer. I think the other one I had that still needs to be addressed was medical assistant. And I know that sounds like a new position that we're adding to our school staff. I wanted to know a little bit more about it, specifically qualifications of the people that we'd be looking at or the applicants would be taking in, and then what their role in the school would be and their responsibilities and their abilities as far as diagnosing a student potentially or making further recommendations on their care or treatment.
Dr. Lewis, you want to go ahead and address that?
All right, thank you, Mr. Pokotic. So it's been discussed for years. There was a time, when some of us were in school, that school nurses were a common fixture in school buildings. That's something that over the past several years that we rarely see in schools. There are some states that do have school nurses, but there's overwhelming shortages there in respect to having medical personnel within the building. So we know prior to COVID that our school secretaries performed a lot of first aid, bandages and ice packs and taking temperatures and caring for students. Certainly with COVID-19, there is a heightened level of seriousness that we felt we needed to address in a way that we felt that we could staff and add an additional layer of support to our office staff, our students, our staff, and all of our stakeholders. So in looking at the best way to address these needs, someone with training as a certified medical assistant, they would be working in partnership with our staff to promote health, well-being. They will conduct temperature screenings. I mean, when we go to a doctor, there is a medical assistant that will take our temperature, check our blood pressure, check our vitals, record information, administer first aid where necessary. That's what our medical assistants at Lakeshore would be charged to do. They would be performing routine clerical duties. So they are recording all of the staff and students that they see, that information is collected within our databases and then distributed to the health department as necessary. So They would also assist us in contacting parents, outlining the symptoms that have been observed while the child or student was in school. They will continually monitor. They'll help with the education of hygiene and safety practices with our kids, our staff. They will maintain their equipment within the quarantine room to promote safety. They'll be a fixture within our school. They're going to be there as another smiling face, a supportive face to greet our students and staff. Answering phone calls, emails, responding to questions. What we want to make sure is that we have staff in place that can respond, to these needs. Our teachers will partner with us in that, but our teachers will be teaching. We really felt we needed to give heightened attention in this area. So we will be looking to add those positions. Did I answer all your questions, Mike?
You did. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's all I had. So I'll turn it back over to you, President Bartle.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Munger, your turn, please.
Okay. Just to jump back to the air conditioning units, those are specific room units. It's not like they are connected together, correct? So when we're talking about that circulation and that filtration of that particular room.
Correct.
Okay. And then I kind of wanted to allude to what you had said before, Joe. We had great crisis process. We have great crisis protocols because unfortunately we did go through some crisis in our district, but that helped set us up for great things that we have already in place now. So going forward, we will have even better protocols because of these situations. And in a sense, we are stronger because of it. Then my original logistical question that I had was classrooms with flexible seating. Are they going back to traditional seating? What is the plan for that? And soft surfaces in classrooms, carpet, bean bags, cushions, what is the cleaning protocols for those?
So in terms of the seating, and George, I'll let you address the cleaning protocols discussion, but in terms of the seating, obviously we have spent some time, with furniture solutions that look a little bit different than the traditional, and here we are thrust back into a situation where the traditional seating or furniture solutions are more valuable. Fortunately, we have a lot of that stuff in storage. It doesn't mean that we can't use the movable stuff, but certainly in spaces or setups where it was collaborative, we have to shift back to having those kids sit, 6 feet apart, all pointed in the same direction. It will look very traditional and much smaller within the classroom. So we've begun with some prototype layouts within the classroom. And of course, our best resource with all of that is going to be our teaching staff, who's going to know the flow of kids, within their classroom best. George, you want to tackle the cleaning protocol stuff?
Yeah, Liz. In particular, when you talk about soft surfaces, that's really the great benefit in this Clorox 360 system that we have, which will deliver disinfectant to front, back, sides of surfaces. So for any soft, carpets and soft seating areas within the classroom, minimally at least once per day, that those areas would be disinfected. And then individually, every class in Lakeshore Public Schools has a different flavor. So we do know that our staff will be looking at their spaces with a fresh set of eyes and removing items that, would be high touch points that may not be necessary at this particular time. So we will try to minimize those touch points as much as we possibly can.
I am good. Back to you, Mrs. Bartle.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Ziegler, I believe, has a couple of questions as well.
Okay, I'm good. Dr. Lewis, with the medical staff, are we gonna have to cover that cost, or will that be a covered under a CARES Act, or is the state gonna help us with that? Considering we'll have, what, about 6 nurses covering the schools?
Well, as you know, Dr. DePonio will echo, the budget is still a big question mark here in the state of Michigan. We do know that there is existing CARES Act money that has been allocated to states, and we would certainly look to utilize CARES Act funds to address the addition of medical assistance, PPE, signage, and all of these additional pieces that we need. Dr. DePonio, what is the dollar amount that school districts have been given regarding the possible additional cost per pupil in respect to COVID-related expenses?
For Lakeshore Public Schools, it's a little under $1.5 million is what the Superintendent's Association nationally has come up with in terms of a cost. Now, the CARES Act funds that we received as a district last year was about $350 per student, but that number is backfills $175 per student cut that occurred. So we're still to the positive $175, but as we're seeing, there's a significant amount of COVID-related expenses. Now, Macomb County Health Department and Macomb County Emergency Management have been wonderful at partnering with the district and all partner districts throughout the county in supplying PPE and sanitizer and disinfectant and the whole 9 yards. So we're working in collaboration with the county to make sure that our purchasing power is strong, but also that there's a good supply chain of what we need to get into the district. But again, the reality is no one knows exactly how many wipes we're going to go through, how many masks we're going to go through, because we haven't been in school yet. So we have to evaluate that as we go along as well. We believe that we're well stocked. I know that we are well stocked, but how quickly we go through those things, we're gonna know, on a day-by-day basis, and obviously be evaluating that and continuing to purchase and make sure that we're well supplied.
All right. Okay. Anybody else have a follow-up question or additional questions? Go ahead,
okay.
Sue, we hear you.
Yeah, okay. And just getting back to, and I feel I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. We have the start date of September 8th. Which is our goal and what we're going towards, starting virtual and in person. If between now and then things start to deteriorate and we feel the in-person is not in the best interest of everyone, we'll still start virtual September 8th. We just may not do the people that would be going in person then would just have to do virtual to start until we felt it was safe to start doing the phase in. Am I correct in my assumption?
You are correct. Sorry, I wasn't waving to you. My lights just cut off up there. You are correct. The first day of school will be September 8th, and the majority of our students will begin that day virtually. We're bringing in a small group on that particular. Our goal is to bring in a small group on that particular day and start to reacclimate students to school and get them back in. At some point, we have to at some point, we've got to get kids back in the school. We want to get kids back in the school. Every staff member in Lakeshore Public Schools wants nothing more for on day one for every child to be here. But it would be irresponsible of us at this particular point, based on what we know with this health crisis, to do that. So it comes down to resources. This is a matter of resources, human resources, the resources of space, the resources of PPE, all of these different things that we need to be able to manage the resources that we have in comparison to the number of students that are in the building. And so the only way we can learn that is by slowly reintegrating students into the building, and we'll evaluate that as we go along. Unfortunately, the consequence of that is that we're asking our community for patience and assistance with their children as we move through that process. And I know that they have been more than patient with this health crisis that we've all been experiencing. But again, Sue, the goal is on September the 8th that we have some students return to the building, but the majority would be logging on for the first time and connecting virtually with their teacher.
Okay. I'm good. Back to you, President Bartle.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, so I'm not sure that I have questions as much as maybe a few comments here. So let me just share some notes that I've been taking throughout the meeting. For me, I come to this with, everybody comes at this with their personal perspective, right? So my personal perspective has been weighing this balance between, we keep hearing about essential workers. So to me, I'm weighing the balance between how essential I believe education is and how it can be delivered effectively in various environments, and the desire to mitigate risk as much as possible. So to me, there is this balancing effort there. And of course, one weighs on the other. And so we kind of have to take both sides of that equation in my mind and try to figure out how we move forward. So having said that, our focus, we keep hearing about students, and certainly our focus is on students, but it's not only on students. There's not a member of that committee or leadership here at Lakeshore that doesn't recognize that as a district, we're also a large employer. Kids are certainly important to us. Absolutely, no doubt that kids are our focus, but we are a large employer and our people matter. Our people matter greatly. So as different as our students and families' perspectives are, I believe that our staff members also have diverse perspectives on this virus in general, as well as, the return to school options. So when we keep asking for kindness and compassion, that isn't intended to just be directed at your friends or neighbors or students. Please include our staff and our instructors along with all of that. Patience and understanding. There was a couple references to trauma and preparedness for trauma. I think that we don't even know right now some of whether we want to use the word trauma or silent trauma comes to my mind as a good term, or just distress. I know that there's a lot of things occurring in individual families that, are not even speaking of something that might be abusive going on in a home that we can't be privy to because we're not seeing those students and maybe not picking up on some red flags. But just in general, families that think they're doing the best they can and are handling this really, so to speak, with kid gloves when they speak to their children about this. But I've seen and heard for myself some responses with kids, and I think sometimes we underestimate or maybe we overestimate how they're handling it. And just because they might be a little quiet doesn't mean that it's not weighing heavily on their minds. And, we're adults struggling to make sense of all of this and trying to step forward, even if it's baby steps. And we're really expecting the same of children, very young children. So I know I'm a bit preaching to the choir. I know this committee, and I know that our leadership and our employees all feel that weight. We all feel that weight on our shoulders and on our hearts. So again, I thank you for all of your work and your effort. And if nothing else stands out in this, what we have come up with is truly uniquely Lakeshore. I have been watching and reading about many other boards and their actions, and some of them are our friends and neighbors. And I would tell you, don't beat them up either. If you hear something going on in a local district, we're not here to beat them up and say our way was better. I hope our way is the best way for Lakeshore, but I'm not saying that something going on in a neighboring district under their unique circumstances and their course of action, I hope their decision is the best thing for their community as well. So I'm super proud to hear you say a Shorean is a Shorean, no matter where we're getting an education or how we're delivering that education. And you know what, if you're any of the neighboring districts, my heart goes out to you and your kids too, because you're living the same struggle that we're living. And I'm super proud of the way we handled it. I hope that they can feel the same in their districts. And this is just a hardship across the board. So, all right, with that, I'll give everybody one more chance if there's any follow-up questions or comments you want to make.
Yeah, I had.
Mr. Conley, go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry, I didn't see it, but go ahead.
That's okay. Joe, you had alluded to the board meeting on the 24th in a couple of weeks as the date when, a lot of work is going to be done between now and then regarding what that specific daily face-to-face instruction looks like. So can you just briefly talk about that process of getting staff together, and then is the intention to have an updated version of this plan with more of those specifics that we're going to be approving on the 24th?
Thank you, Dan. No, the board would approve one plan. It would be this plan. It's a very broad discussion about, obviously these are 30,000 foot view items. When it comes to the details of how this is carried out, that's something that we will be working very closely with staff on, obviously at each building and how that looks at the elementary level, at the middle school level, at the high school level. I would anticipate by the 24th, we would have, an update for the board in terms of what those first couple of weeks are going to look like. We certainly want to get that out to our families as quickly as possible. We also, will be the implications of selections by families will drive some of how swift we can be with, a firm like this is how it's going to be. As I've mentioned with our staff, people are looking for like concrete plans, and concrete is just not something we can build with this. We need a substance that's pliable and bendable. We need what's the spray stuff that Flex Seal. We had so many viewers today. I just gave Flex Seal a plug there. They should donate some money to Lakeshore Public Schools. But my point, obviously, is that and I absolutely sympathize with our families. We want to give them, again, as every bit of information moving forward so that they can make decisions and they can plan accordingly. But this, again, is going to be a relatively fluid situation. All of this is, again, and I can't stress enough, it's with a desire to get kids back into school and have it be done safely. The easiest thing we could do is say, we're just not going to open. It's simple, it's clean, boom, done. And I don't throw that out there in judgment of other districts that have made that decision. Like President Bartle has mentioned, every community has specific reasons for what they do and the reason that it's best for them. And 100%, public education is in this fight together. And so we don't, we're not competing against anyone else. I lost my train of thought there. Maybe I answered that in my 15-minute barrage of items there. Did I cover what you were asking for, Dan?
You did, and we got the analogy out of the way too, which I was waiting for. So thank you for that.
Okay, last call. Any questions or comments? All right, I believe that we are ready for a roll call vote. Mrs. Munger, please.
Yes, Mr. Bakotic,
I vote in favor. Aye.
Mrs. Munger, aye. Mrs. Bartle,
Sorry, there was a delay. It was not an intentional pause. It was just a little glitch. Aye, thank you.
Mrs. DeLong,
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler,
Aye.
Mr. Colling,
Aye.
and Mr. Densler.
Aye.
All right. All right. Thank you all. I know that was probably our longest and most exhausting meeting for lots of reasons, not just the amount of time, but the amount of emotion. So I appreciate you all and your efforts. Having said that, we are going to move on to agenda item 6, which is board commentary, if anybody has any additional comments to make this evening. All right, I'm going to, Mrs. DeLong, please go ahead.
I just want to say, I had written something and it's long, but I'm not going to go through it all. But I just want to give a big thank you to Dr. DePonio, the administrator, staff, parents, community for all of their hard work in helping to prepare for this upcoming year. Dr. DePonio, you have worked tirelessly since this all started, making sure the seniors had all their events they possibly could have. The mobile graduations were absolutely wonderful and fun to be a part of. So thank you for everything you've done this summer. To the parents that may still be listening or will be viewing this later, I do not envy you. You have a very difficult decision ahead of you, but take the time, talk it out. If you are so inclined and your children are old enough and you want to make them part of the decision, have that conversation with them. Gauge what they're feeling. Above all, we need to all stay positive. This is going to be a very challenging school year. And as Dr. D has said before, flexibility is the word of the year. So, this isn't going to go away anytime soon. We all have to learn how to adapt and live with this. We all need to take precautions and do the best we can to social distance and do everything. So we're Shorians. We always come together through everything. We will get through this. Just everybody, please stay positive and know that there'll be challenges. And please know that Lakeshore has the safety of the staff, the students, the community foremost in their mind. So I hope everybody has a good rest of their summer. And I'm looking forward to the start of the school year, whatever that may be. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I do have a comment, if that's all right.
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right, so it's kind of hard to follow that up, Sue. That was very well spoken, but I do have a few little things to add to that. I think we're all aware that this upcoming school year is going to be unlike any we've seen, both as with students in our own homes, with my children as an example, or experiences that we've had in the past. It's not going to be anything like that. For our teachers and our administration, I can't imagine. I know Joe mentioned briefly earlier that, this is not going to be like any first day of school that he's ever had in his career as a teacher or an administrator. So we know this year is going to provide some different challenges for us, some uncertainty, and that's going to be a huge factor, the uncertainty, because like we've mentioned too, we don't know what it's going to be like on September 8th. And right now, in the world we live in, that's a very long time from now. We also want our community members to know that this was a difficult choice for all of us. For me especially, I know that this was something that I've put a lot of thought into. It's probably some of the thing that, we'd be looking back and saying, we wish we could be doing a teacher contract negotiation right now, because even that would be looking favorable to this kind of a decision. It's not something we take lightly. We know that this means you're placing your children in the care of our staff and teachers, but now you're doing it with a lot more risk involved. So we're taking this very seriously, and it wasn't an easy decision for us, but I think the plan that we've got and the way we got to this plan shows a lot of strength in our community, because we did it with our community. We didn't have one group saying, here's how it's going to happen and here's what you're going to do. We involved our teachers, we involved our administrators, our community members, and our parents as well. So I'm glad that we gave everybody a seat at the table to kind of take a look at what we need to be doing to make sure we do this safely. And I feel comfortable knowing that we have this framework in place, and it sounds as though Joe and his team can use the framework we have here and decide what's best as the year progresses and obviously as things change. And we also have to be mindful too that a lot also relies on what's happening outside our schools, what's happening in our state, what's happening in our city, and in our local community in Macomb County and the Metro Detroit area. So those things are also going to play a role in it. And we also have a role in making sure that we're careful, making sure we take care to be careful with our kids when we're not in school, and that we're doing those temperature checks at home, keeping our kids home if they don't feel well, and speaking up if we see something that needs to be brought to the school's attention. And then lastly, just to remember too, that we are all in this together. It's not going to be an easy ride this year, but we're all going to be doing this together. We have the support of each other. And if you're doing things virtually, it's going to be a different look for everybody. It is going to be different from what we had to deal with at the end of last year. I'm excited to see the different things that our teachers are going to be able to come up with, given that they've had the summer to plan and to work with administration and come up with some new techniques. So I think even though this isn't going to be a year that we may want, and it's not going to be the kind of education that we're used to, it's still going to have value. It's still going to work. It's still going to be Lakeshore, and we're still, doing this together. So, hang in there. We'll get through this, and hopefully maybe next summer we'll be talking about phase 6 and getting back to life the way it is. But until then, we're all doing this together. We'll make it through. Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. It is 11:01. Thank you so very much for your evening tonight and all of those hours that went into making that plan come together. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Support.
All right. Motion by Mrs. Munger, supported by Mrs. DeLong. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.